Okay, it's 5:30 p.m. and time for the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners meeting for Wednesday, September 9th. We want to thank you for joining us. Any of you who are at the courthouse or joining us online. Just want to pass on a bit of information regarding how we run our meetings on Zoom during this time of social distancing. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share the screen with the call. Participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet. All participants will be entered into the meeting with their audio muted, meaning the commission and the public will not be able to hear you. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their line when not speaking and introduce themselves each time they speak. If you have a public comment on an agenda item or under regular public comment, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that speakers give their names and address for the minutes. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove any speaker from the meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The chat function has been disabled and a recording of this meeting will be available on our website after the meeting. Okay, with that, we'll head into our agenda. Our agenda has a proclamation, which we'll start with. Then we have 5 items on our consent agenda, 4 items on our regular agenda, then appointments, general public comment, commissioner and administrator miscellaneous, and that will conclude our meeting. If it's all right with other commissioners, I will go ahead and read the proclamation. Okay. Got to get it on my screen here. Whereas in the United States, this is for Suicide Prevention Month for September 20th. Whereas in the United States, 1 person dies by suicide every 11.1 minutes. In Kansas, 1 person dies by suicide every 15 hours. Whereas in 2018, 556 Kansans died of suicide and thousands of friends and family members were changed forever by losing those people. Whereas the Douglas County Suicide Prevention Coalition, which is comprised of representatives from agencies, schools, law enforcement, and social services, including Kansas Suicide Prevention Headquarters, Inc., Headquarters Counseling Center, Burt Nash Community Mental Health Center, LMH Health, Douglas County Government, Willow Domestic Violence Center, Heartland Community Health Center, Communities and Schools Mid-America, Lawrence Douglas County Public Health, Lawrence Public Schools, Baldwin School District, Senior Resource Center, KU School of Social Welfare, Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center, KU Police Department, Douglas County Sheriff's Department, Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence, the American Association of Suicidology, and the community at large, and who dedicated to reducing the frequency of suicide attempts and deaths through training, educational programs, and outreach, urges that all Douglas County residents, 1, recognize suicide as a significant public health problem in Kansas and Douglas County and declare suicide prevention a priority. 2, support the development of accessible behavioral health services for all Douglas County residents. And 3, encourage initiatives based on the goals and activities contained in the National Strategy for Suicide Prevention, Zero Suicide of the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention, and the Way Forward by the Action Alliance Suicide Attempt Survivor Task Force. Whereas far too many residents of Douglas County and Kansas die by suicide each year, and most of these deaths are preventable. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County do hereby designate September 2020 as Suicide Prevention Month and urge Lawrence and Douglas County residents to learn how they can help because suicide prevention is everyone's business. Adopted this 9th day of September 2020. Sarah, is there any, Steve DeVore I see is here, and I think Steve had some comments.
Yes, I would like to start by saying thank you for taking the time to recognize all of the many great organizations that you had just explained in your presentation. I mean, it's an honor to be associated with these other organizations in Douglas County that's doing some great work and helping a lot of people. As we start to talk about some of the numbers that you had shared, last year there was 556 individuals that died by suicide in the state of Kansas. One of the statistics that I think that people overlook is the fact that for every person that dies by suicide, there are an estimated 25 attempts. So if someone in the state of Kansas unfortunately dies by suicide every 15 to 16 hours, that means every 35 minutes, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, someone is attempting suicide. And it's from the work of all of the organizations that you had mentioned that have come together to try and curb that trend and see how we can be able to reduce the number of individuals that are contemplating suicide and work with them to give them the tools and the resources necessary to help them. As importantly, as if not more importantly, the fact that you are recognizing suicide prevention locally, it allows everyone to continue to have a positive and healthy conversation about suicide prevention, and about mental health in general. And I think that has to be one of the very first steps that we all take. We all unite together and say, hey, how can we go about creating a conversation in our communities, in our schools, in our churches, and most importantly, in our own families, talking about some of the challenges that we all face and some of the tools and the resources that are available. So on behalf of all the organizations, on behalf of myself, I want to say thank you for recognizing the work that we do, the work that still needs to be done, and allowing us to have this opportunity to create better conversations in our community about this issue and the ways that we can be able to have a healthier and safer community. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks for the work that you and your partners do. Fortunately, so many of us have been touched by suicide in one way or another, and without the work you're doing, it'd be many more. So hopefully we can get those rates down and keep doing that good work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, if there's no other comments, we'll move on to our consent agenda. There are 5 items on the consent agenda. Does any commissioner have an item they'd like to pull off the consent agenda for further discussion?
No. Don't.
With that, I'd take a motion for items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the consent agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0. Moving on to our first regular agenda item, it's the Behavioral Health Partners, Inc. governance structure. And I see that Bob Tryansky is here and Sarah is here as well. I'm not quite sure who's going to take the lead on this one.
I'll let Bob introduce the item.
Thanks.
Good evening, commissioners. I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on Steve DeVore's comments as you recognize the important work in suicide prevention. This Behavioral Health Leadership Coalition takes that work very seriously, and there are varieties of things that are happening in our community to address suicide prevention. Obviously, sort of a whole host of activities by the Suicide Prevention Coalition and by headquarters and our partners in behavioral health during this important month. But the coalition, has embraced as a strategy to address suicide prevention in Douglas County and to reduce the number of attempts, the number of people who struggle with suicidal ideation, the implementation of zero suicide. So this is coming up in October 6th, 7th, and 8th here in Douglas County. We will host the first Zero Suicide Academy in the state of Kansas. We will be joined with our partners, behavioral health coalition partners, a variety of primary care practices, agencies in the community who will engage in kind of a 3-day deep dive on practices and policies and procedures for recognizing suicide risk earlier and taking the necessary steps to address that risk with people when they come into contact with our healthcare providers. It's been a good couple of weeks in Douglas County. Our school districts a number of our school districts have embraced the implementation of sources of strength, and so that is moving forward. And at the elementary level, a number of schools are piloting the good behavior game. So I just wanted to sort of shout out and talk about the fact that we are moving towards having a comprehensive strategy for addressing suicide risk in our community. The numbers that Steve shared are sobering. We know from the health department's work that the last time we had data on this, which I think is the end of 2018, that we had 1,100 people in the course of a year who showed up in the emergency department struggling with suicidal ideation or suicide attempt. We know that 750 of those were struggling with suicidal ideation. 350 people had a suicide attempt that year, 120 between the ages of 10 and 19. So these are just, the types of numbers, again, not to overwhelm people, but to say that this is a serious issue, and this coalition is committed to addressing that issue and to improving our continuum of care. It's hard to believe that the last time we talked to you about this was in June, but our coalition, and particularly Bert Nash and LMH, have been working very hard to create a governance for the operation and the management of the crisis center that will be built on the treatment and recovery campus of Douglas County. So I know Patrick Schmitz from Bert Nash and Russ Johnson from LMH are here to answer your questions about the governance structure reflected in a set of bylaws for the Board of Directors for Behavioral Health Partners Incorporated. That will be a partnership between Bert Nash and LMH Health. And the vision and our intention is that that organization will manage the crisis center. So you have a copy of those bylaws, outlines the governance structure, and what we're hoping tonight is that we would be able to get your endorsement of those bylaws and a commitment to place several members on the board of directors. So with that, I will turn it over to Patrick and to Russ, and they can sort of lead us through the issues at play here.
Sure, I will get started, but I'll turn it over to Russ pretty quickly. I'm at the tail end of a cold, and I'm afraid I'll start coughing again here real quickly. But first, thank you for recognizing the work of the multiple organizations around suicide and suicide prevention. We greatly thank you for that. And thank you also for the time to discuss the bylaws and what we propose to do. And I'll turn it over to Russ because I feel that cough coming on. So I'll jump in when I can.
Please do. And also on our call with us is our two colleagues, Jeanette and Stephen, who have just been absolutely instrumental to bringing this partnership to fruition and doing, frankly, an enormous amount of work that it takes to anticipate operationalizing a center and working together in a collaborative organization. And I think Patrick and I feel like we're off to a really great start. I think that the notion of behavioral health partners and having a hospital and a excellent community mental health center partnering together is somewhat ideal for a crisis center because it is the intersection of emergency care and mental health care, and it brings Patrick's organization's strengths and our organization together in a collaborative way. We're already doing that, partnering in our emergency room, but I think this brings it to a higher level. Bob, I'm going to make just a couple of short comments in favor of the commission, exploring what it would like to know. We really put a lot of work into the bylaws to reflect the collaboration and spirit, not only between our two organizations, but also with the county and with the Behavioral Health Leadership Coalition. We worked, frankly, quite in a lengthy way to get that right fit between governance and management and to find the balance of trustees, and went through 3 or 4 iterations. And, I think on the upfront side of these things, you take greater precaution because you're getting to know each other. And we don't have an organization that's 10 years old and the luxury of looking back at what's worked and what's not. And I really feel like even though some of those conversations were difficult in a good way. I think it ended up resulting in a model that Patrick and I feel good about. Interestingly, it's a board of 9 with 3 appointed by each of the partners and 3 by the county. And I work every day under a board of 9. And so I know that that's a very workable size. It's a size that's large enough to create diversity and variability, but not so large that it's hard to do effective governance. And so I think Patrick and I feel like we hit a sweet spot with the BHLC, candidly with Bob's involvement and guidance and some of his thoughts on, a middle direction here or there. We have already actively engaged in the significant work of everything from defining what a leader of this clinical program would look like, to the operational aspects, to the support services. And that's really where I think Patrick and I owe it to Stephen and Jeanette, who have, completely formed a bond and taken this conversation to a very productive level. So I know tonight we're talking about governance, and I will leave it there, Bob, but I just wanted the commission to know that we've already moved forward with the operational planning of this as well. And I think we're in a good solid place right now, and I'll stop and see if there's questions for Patrick and I, or more likely Jeanette and Stephen.
And Stephen, right. Yeah, they've done the yeoman's work on this and set it up for us very nicely.
Yeah. So thanks for the opportunity of being here, and we're proud to be a part of this solution for the community.
Thank you, Russ. Appreciate that. Commissioners, any questions for Russ or Patrick or Stephen or Bob or Jeanette?
I have one. Well, I have a few. A couple are just kind of timing wise and logistical, but this one is one I don't know why I didn't see this and wonder this before, and it may just be I probably just need an explanation of kind of the meaning of the word partner. But in Article 2, Section 1 about membership of the behavioral health partners, it's the governmental partner is the hospital because of its connection with the city of Lawrence, and then the nonprofit Bert Nash is the member. But I went back and looked for the county as being listed as one of the partners. So is the county considered outside of the partnership? Yeah. We have ability to appoint directors to the board, or is there a different word for the county's role in this, or tell me why the county. Please tell me why the county is not listed as a partner.
The formation, and Jeanette or Stephen or Patrick jump in. So Bert Nash and the hospital will form a corporation that will operate the crisis center and contract with the county to do so. And so the members of the corporation are those 2 entities that take the risk and provide the infrastructure, et cetera. And candidly, Nancy, to your important question, when Patrick and I first started going down that road, and we conceived of a board that we would largely appoint. We got some very clear feedback that it needed to be broader than that. And so the solution was, well, even though we're the corporate members, we want to be governed by a broader goal, and that included the county in an equal way, where we appoint 3, Bert Nash appoints 3, and the county appoints 3. And so it provides that governance oversight without the county having to get into the corporate liability and operational management of the entity.
Okay. Russ, thanks so much. That's helpful. I think there's the technical partnership term that you just described, the corporate
Yes.
term, and then there's the heart part of me that
Yes.
thinks, well, we're all partners in this together.
Yes.
Right.
So that's a great, helpful explanation, and I see the difference now. Thank you for that. My only other questions were having to do with I want to say I was kind of part of those conversations that were sometimes tense about how do we have all the representation that we need so that this isn't just a technical board, but is representative of the greater community and certainly allows the county to have the accountability to the taxpayer that we need to have. So I appreciate that we've gotten to this point, because this seems like the right place to land. It just makes me wonder, where are we in terms of, once we agree with the governing structure, what is your timeline for seating this board, and then for turning around and seating or finding the administrative director, the medical director, since we have a crisis center that's going to have its groundbreaking pretty soon? Just kind of, have you all discussed timelines for that?
Yeah, we have. We are looking. I'll go to your second part of your question in terms of the administration. We have some initial drafts of some job descriptions of what the administrator and the chief medical officer of that facility will look like, and we will likely be prepared to start somewhere around the end of the year, first of 2021, to advertise for that. That will take several months to procure those individuals for that position, because these are pretty high level positions, people that need some experience. So that will be around then. I believe in terms of the timing of the board, we will be looking, once this is approved, the three entities, Burt Nash, LMH, the county, will start having conversations about how do we ensure that the makeup of this board is diverse, and how do we together ensure that happens. And so those conversations will start taking place here this fall, and our hope is we can put or maybe first of the year, and then maybe get that board up and seated around first quarter 2021, so that they would have several months to operate as a board before the center even begins to actually operate. And so they'd be able to hire the staff that we need to, that initial staff, and get the work done to further bring the project ready to open up late 2021. So that's kind of the timeline, about, first quarter 2021. Is that about what you're thinking, Russ? I think that's what we've talked about.
Yeah, I think it gives if we're sort of, if I recall right, we're Q4 of 21 at the earliest for opening, if I recall right. And so it gives the board really 9 months or so of governance, and they can be part of the planning. But it also doesn't bring us on an executive director or administrator or whatever we're going to call it too soon in the process. I think that's probably job one of the board. In my world at least, the role of the board is really the hiring and oversight of the senior executive. And so obviously we want the sequence to be a board that's comfortable with each other, has had a little bit of a chance to work together and get to know each other, and then to be in that really important process of interviewing and selecting that senior leader. And so I feel like that we've got really good time, and that gives us 2 or 3 months before then, Commissioner, to talk about what we want that to look like. I'm going through that right now at the hospital, and we have kind of a matrix that we use, because, diversity is age, it's expertise, it's, orientation, it's lived experience, it's all those kind of things. And even with 9 members, we're probably not going to be able to tick every box that we would like to tick in the first seating of the board. And so working through that, and I think to Patrick's point, really sharing that responsibility across all 3 organizations. So it isn't that LMH gets to pick whoever 3 they want, and then everybody else has to figure out how to make the diversity work. It's really bringing us all together and talking about it as leadership, and then bringing a candidate slate back.
If I could jump in here just a little bit, I'd like to kind of think a little bit more about that timeline, just how it fits into the county schedule of things, and provide some feedback to Patrick and Russ on that process as we move forward. So if we could keep it all very tentative for the members of the public and the media that are listening to this, just if we, I'd like us to think a little bit deeper about that timeline.
Sure, yeah, this is just some initial thoughts and ideas between Russ and between our 2 teams, without a chance yet to discuss with you, Sarah. So absolutely.
I do, while someone else is coming up with a question and I had interjected, I guess I also want to say, this is really huge. This is a big deal to the work. I believe it was 2016, right, Bob? When we and Nancy and Jill and I began to have some conversations around what does this look like? So this is really a huge milestone and a very long process to do something truly, I believe, revolutionary in how this service and provision is done in a community like this. So I know we have asked Russ and Patrick and their teams to think outside of boxes and circles and all kinds of devices to do wholly different things than they've ever done in the past. And I can't be more proud to be here at this moment, to see this partnership really come together in a way that I'm incredibly proud to be a part of. And I want to thank them for their dedication to this effort and never giving up and continuing to push forward to do what we all believe is in the best interests of our citizens.
Well, thank you for pushing us, Sarah, and giving us the opportunity to bend and flex and stretch and do things differently. Thank you for your support in that.
Thank you, Sarah. I just had one quick question, and it noted that all aspects of program services and other matters addressed through the funding agreement. So yes, I agree that this is a very important document and a very important step, but it seems like the other important step is that funding agreement. And
yes,
wondered if we had a timeline for that. And would that be before January, after, how does that fit in with our budget cycle?
So we have a placeholder for the funding amount needed in 2021 inside our budget. What that breaks down to in terms of what's needed in 2021 and beyond for fully operational the crisis center. I know Bob and Jeanette and Stephen have been in constant conversation about that. And I believe we're looking to do a presentation to the commission later this fall to kind of also again, to sort of dust off where that funding agreement is and get all of those steps in order. Am I right on that, Bob and Jeanette?
Yes, you are correct. Yes, you are correct. And there will be some steps that need to be taken. There will be some expenses that, we will need to cover and identify and cover, and that will need to happen before the end of this year, I think. So there will be some incremental steps here. One of the pieces of that is kind of expansion of our integrated crisis team, putting some staffing, starting to build that workforce as we've talked about. So this will be an iterative process with some steps along the way.
Great, thanks. Any other questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. if I could just chime in real quick, I know that, we're really eager to share a lot of details about the behavioral health campus with you. Your October calendar will be full of a lot of conversations about the behavioral health campus, ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings and updates in terms of the construction. So we're very close to being able to spend a lot of time going into a lot of detail on all the aspects of this project. Thank you, and sorry for interrupting.
And Sarah, I just wanted to also highlight one thing. It's in the memo, it's in the bylaws, but there is a statement there that LMH Burt Nash, the county, spent quite a bit of time in drafting to speak to this, the sort of the complexion and the relationships and the blend of expertise and experience that would be in the board. I know we've got some questions from the community about consumer representation, and so the language does make it clear that there would be at least one person with direct lived experience with mental illness or substance abuse, and so that's very clearly articulated. I just want to make sure that the public is kind of aware of that, as well as some of the other diversity, equity, and inclusion aspirations and commitments that this team is committed to.
Yeah, Bob, thanks for sharing that. I think at our, for the public, we had a study session on this very topic back in June and had a fairly lengthy conversation about governance and some ideas we had, and just really the work that's gone into developing this by this group. I think a few have referenced it was not easy, was challenging. And, we even hired consultants to help us sort of guide our way through this. Because collaboration is difficult, and the benefits are huge, but getting to that is a ton of work. And I think as Sarah said, this is a huge moment, and I don't think we can stop at this moment and be at this milestone without recognizing the work of Commissioner Thelman and Commissioner DeRusso on this. I'm sort of a latecomer to the party on this, but just really a ton of respect, and both commissioners should feel really excited about the work ahead. So kudos to everyone on that.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Patrick, I just wanted to say thank you for that. But back to Bob's comment about the statement that's embedded in the bylaws. I think everyone would do well to read that 2 or 3 or 4 times. It is not the language of a hard corporate set of bylaws. It's really the language of people who love their community and who really want to build something very special together for the community. And I think it was a labor of love to get there. And I'm so grateful to all of you for, listening to the voices on the board who voiced some concern about representation of folks who have lived experience, and taking that seriously, and then really wanting to go beyond words, but to actual change beliefs into action, to make what we think we want to do, to make it real and make it right. So I'm so grateful for that work. It's really beautiful and something we should all pay attention to. Thanks.
This has been very much like the development of the facility itself and all the iterations it's went through and all the work, and a lot of frustrations on people's part about the timing and how long it's taken, but the result will be better. And that's the same thing with the governance. It took longer than probably any one of us wanted, but the result will be a much better outcome because of the time spent up front doing that. And there's a lot of work yet to be done, but thankfully, we've slowed it down enough to do the work we needed to. So thank you for allowing us to do that. And again, pushing us to go further and further.
Any other further questions or comments, commissioners? Russ, did you have one more thing you wanted to share?
Well, I wanted to express an interesting observation I had on Tuesday, I think it was. I had a executive committee of my board and we were meeting and going over goals for the hospital for 20 and 21. And I had 3 trustees specifically talking about mental health. And that is really a tribute to you all as commissioners to kind of elevating this dialogue in this community. Bob, Patrick, Sarah, the commitment. There's just a different, and that's not common in hospitals. When they think about their top goals for the year ahead, they're talking about cardiology and things like that. So I just think that, Sarah, your opening comments about this is, we have this opportunity in this community to do something very unique. And I know Stephen or Patrick's board is really behind him. And I think my board is learning and understanding what it means to be a partner in mental health. I think we have a lot of a good, steady wind behind our sails here. Just an ad lib.
Thank you. Okay, this is a public agenda item, so we'll open it up and, well, actually all our agenda items are public, but this is a item that we invite public comment on. Do we have any member of the public who would like to speak on this? We start by checking with Sarah to see if there's anybody at the courthouse who'd like to speak.
We have no one for this item.
Thank you. And if you're online on Zoom and you'd like to speak on this item, you just need to raise your hand. Use the raise your hand function there. Jill, it doesn't look like we're seeing anybody. No. Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll bring it back to the commission for motions.
Well, I'm happy to make a motion that we approve the proposed governance structure of the Behavioral Health Partners, Inc. And we agree to appoint 3 members to the board of directors on behalf of the Douglas County Commission.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Passes 3-0. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. This is a big day and certainly something we should celebrate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're honored to be part of this.
All right, moving to our next item, which is a zoning and code item for the request for approval of Tier 2 agritourism registration for the Burning Barrel LCC. And I believe
Tanya.
is Catherine, is that right? Or is this Tanya?
It's me.
Hi, Tanya, there you are.
So I have a presentation. I think I need to share this screen. Great. Can you see the presentation? No.
We can see a beautiful lake.
Oh, okay.
Had someone's toes.
You have to select specifically when you go to select screen, make sure you select the right thing.
There we go.
There you
That looks right?
go.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm Tanya Voigt, the zoning director for Douglas County. And this is our first agritourism application for the year 2020. This request is for a Tier 2 agritourism application for Burning Barrel. And the applicants are Brian Strecker and Kristen Warner. And the address is 292 N 2100 Road, Lecompton. Agritourism is the intersection of agriculture and tourism. When the public visits rural areas for recreation, education, enjoyment, entertainment, adventure, or relaxation. Agritourism uses the rural experience as a tool for economic development. Agritourism regulations were adopted in 2014 in Douglas County. The Kansas Agritourism Promotion Act was signed into law in 2004. The purpose of the act is to promote the growth of the agritourism industry in Kansas. Benefits of the legislation include the creation of a registration process through which the state can assist in the promotion of agritourism operations. So if you go to the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, you can pull up any registered with the state agritourism business in the state of Kansas. Our office is proud to announce that we have a live web-based map of registered agritourism sites in Douglas County. We're working hard to register agritourism businesses that are already registered with the state of Kansas. The storytelling and mapping tool are very interactive and will hopefully help generate interest and business to those operations and bring more people to Douglas County. I'm going to show you just a real quick example of this map that we have. So you can click on this link to any of the corresponding numbers in the county, and you can see what the agritourism use is, what their address is, and then there's a storyline and a link to their website. So we really are very excited about this. This is a pretty new tool, but it helps kind of showcase the registered agritourism businesses in Douglas County. There we go. This application meets the standards for a Tier 1 administrative process, except for the fact that Tier 1 standards require that the property owners live on site. And in this situation, the property owners do not live on the site. And so that automatically bumped them into a Tier 2 request, even though their impact, what they're requesting for, falls within the low intensity agritourism uses. So some of the allowed uses when folks register for agritourism in Douglas County, examples are farmers markets, stands, U-Pick operations, farm wineries, pumpkin type patches with corn mazes, farm-related tours and exhibits, historical, cultural, and agricultural related educational and learning experiences, farm stays, recreation-related operations such as birdwatching, hiking, fishing, hunting, horseback riding, and assembly-type uses, which is the one that we see the most often, which are typically receptions, family gatherings, people using their spaces for the public to be able to meet in a setting for weddings or those type of gatherings and create an experience in the rural areas. Also added to that are ancillary sales. So there are times when someone can be an ag exempt where they grow all their product on their site and then they sell that product. But if they'd like to sell things outside of what their actual site produces, so an example of that would be a Christmas tree farm that wants to sell ornaments that they actually, are ordering from somewhere else. Those are ancillary sales, and that does automatically put them into a requirement of an agritourism registration. The highlighted yellow are the uses that they have applied for with their agritourism event. So farm markets, tours of the farm, small scale weddings and receptions, and educational tours showing people their farms, and some ancillary sales. The AG1 district, which is what this property is zoned, is our primary agricultural zone district. It's intended to accommodate a full range of agricultural activities, such as raising of crops, livestock, processing and sale of agricultural products raised on the premise, and at the same time offer protection to agricultural land and land uses. Uses intended to support and encourage agriculture are highly promoted in this district, such as agritourism, value-added agricultural businesses, commercial grain storage, small-scale ag, small-scale agricultural research facilities, and ancillary agricultural retail sales. This is the state definition of agriculture, which has been incorporated into the zoning regulations as well. So more information about this specific property. It's currently zoned AG1. Everything in Douglas County that's over 20 acres falls within the AG1 zoning district. Their parcel is roughly 30 acres. And you can see the blue shaded area are all the properties around them within a 1 mile or so radius that are also zoned AG1. And then the areas in yellow are zoned AG2. Those are all of our parcels that fall below 10 acres. Just a note that there are sensitive lands on this site. There's no floodplain or floodway or wetland. We don't have a historical listing on the site. We don't have a listing of native prairie on the site, though I do believe the applicants do want to discuss that they do have native grasses and some native things on the site. They'll discuss that a little bit further here soon. The green shaded area is prime farmland, and the yellow shaded area is, we don't regulate it. It's called farmland of statewide importance. But we do show this on our public parcel search because we feel like it's important enough when people are trying to make decisions based on their land use, that this classification from the NRCS Office of Statewide Importance is important enough for people to at least see it. So in an effort to identify what prime farmland really is, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is the NRCS office, they've inventoried land that can be used for the production of the nation's food supply. Prime farmland is of major importance in meeting the national short and long range needs for food. Because the supply of high quality farmland is limited, the Department of Agriculture recognizes that responsible levels of government as well as individuals should encourage and facilitate the wise use of our nation's prime farmland. Prime farmland is land that has the best combination of physical and chemical characteristics for producing food, feed, forage, fiber, and oilseed crops. This proposed use, this is actually a picture of their farm. The proposed application provides a culinary tourism experience in a rustic setting of a working farm. The establishment would allow others to participate in farm tours, small-scale gatherings such as weddings and receptions, followed by a farm-sourced menu meal. The property owner is a chef who would also prepare the meals straight from the products that are grown on the farm. A tour of the farm will be offered with the farmer showing and describing the methods used to raise the meat, poultry, fruits, and vegetables. These are educational meals as well as featuring foods that are local and as seasonal as you can find. The proposed application is seasonal with hours of operation, Fridays and Saturdays from noon to 11 and Sunday 9 a.m. to noon. The seasonal months are May through October. The occupancy of the event is determined by the parking, and they've set parking at 40 off-street parking spaces, which would limit them to 80 occupants. They've also provided 2 ADA spaces, which you'll see in their site plan here in just a minute. Here's some photos of the farm, and here's photos of the end product. The agritourism site plan does not need to meet all the requirements of a site plan, but it must be adequately illustrating that it's in conformance with the zoning regulations. At a minimum, the things that we look for is that all the structures to be utilized for the use are identified in the plan with dimensions. They show us distances to property lines if we can't measure them ourselves. Areas where the agritourism use will occur and any areas where visitors will be allowed. Access to parking, so we want to see the parking spaces and we want to see them dimensioned and know the number of parking spaces provided, and that's mostly to determine occupancy. The water and sanitation facilities have to be approved by the Douglas County Health Department. We'd like the hours of operation noted, which they have added to their site plan. I believe the first site plan that went out did not have the hours of operation noted, and they've added that information. Also, we want to know their anticipated attendance, which we can often see from their parking spaces. So just a summary, their seasonal months, their hours of operation. They do have a structure on the site that is a farm building that did not go through our building permit process. It was an ag exempt farm building, I think that was built in the 80s maybe. And so that is not currently today a part of their plan to be used by the public. They would have to go through several steps that Tina Rakes, she's on this call, she can answer some of those building code questions if you have those. They are capped at 80 visitors. The distances to the property lines all meet greater than 50 foot, which is what our requirement is. They show the parking lot dimensions, the parking spaces. The road access is also important, so we contact whoever is in charge, whether it's the township or Douglas County Public Works or KDOT, and make sure that their entrance meets all of the standards that are required for that type of use. We look at lighting, and we always ask that lighting, you know, not be on 24 hours a day, that it be immediately turned off after an event and off completely when there's no event going on. The sanitation system, like I said, has to be approved by the health department, and this site is served by rural water. So some of the internal comments that we received from Public Works, they have some specifications that they're working with the property owner on making some modifications to the entrance. The health department provided some guidance for on-site portable facilities and hand washing stations. They did talk about if there are back-to-back events that they want those serviced each day and cleaned, and then they need to have at least one ADA compliant portable facility for each event. Lecompton Fire, I was able to reach today, and they did say that they would like the opportunity to do a safety inspection with them of the fire pit that they plan to cook from prior to any operation. And they just want to check it for separation distances and safety and those types of things. Zoning and Codes also reviews during the registration process several other things. We look at, you know, who's going to be the operator. Is it the property owner? That property owner can have family members be a part of it, and they can also have employees. Is there adequate parking available, and is there ADA parking spaces available and noted? We also look at making sure there's no motorized vehicles, that if there is any motorized vehicles, that those are typically just agricultural machinery, and that they're not, you know, using four-wheelers and those type of things to give people tours and put, you know, people in the public on that make a lot of noise. There's no outdoor amplification of sound other than just a small stereo or radio, so they can't hook into a big speaker system and have big concerts, those type of things. We also look at what are their hours of operation, and if it's all during the daylight, or if they need a lighting plan because there's going to be evening hours where there will be people there during the dark. We check and coordinate with the health department to make sure that they can meet all the health department standards. And then we verify that none of the uses are within 50 feet of the neighboring property lines. So we did receive one public comment, and we received it by letter, and that is in your packet. Some of the concerns regarding that public comment were open air cooking of products that contain gluten, thistles, which they identified as a noxious weed, hours of operation, which now has been added to the site plan, noise, and alcohol. And you'll get to see on the recommended conditions that we've put a cap on the alcohol. I think we've done that quite often on agritourism registrations, that we've closed alcohol prior to the hours of operation when the event is actually closing. So the Board of County Commissioners, they can take the following actions. You can approve the registration. You can waive any standard that you'd like. You can approve the registration with conditions or restrictions. You can return the registration to staff with the request for more information, or you can deny the registration. And our recommendation would be that if you approve it, that there would be some conditions added. We have 18 conditions here. Those would be that the entrance be constructed and signed off on by Douglas County Public Works prior to them operating. That if the event exceeds the number of parking spaces that they've dedicated, that they would either need, and that's continual, they would either need to get a conditional use permit, or you can do up to 4 events, and this is anyone in the public can do 4 special events that have large numbers per calendar year. Hours of operation would be Friday and Saturday noon to 11 and Sundays 9 to 2, and the seasonal months would be May through October. No camping would be allowed. No smoking shall be posted in all areas, and a designated smoking area would be established on a hard surface using the proper receptacles for disposal. ADA spaces shall be clearly delineated in the parking areas and designed in accordance with ADA guidelines and the zoning regulations. And an on-site sign permit would be required if they want to put a permanent sign advertising their business on the property. If there are specific event signs, so if say a wedding or a type of event is just happening, you know, at one time, that if they're going to put those on other people's property or in the right of way, that those are limited in size, they need to be removed within 1 day after the event. And they also need to actually provide that location and a signed letter from those property owners saying it's okay that they place those there. No fireworks would be permitted. And no fires would be allowed if there was a burn ban in effect for Douglas County. No lighting shall project onto adjoining residential lots, and then spotlighting, glaring lights are prohibited. Outdoor lighting can only be on when the event is happening. Alcohol, when included with an event, shall be provided by caterers, and serving shall cease at 10 p.m. Motors or motorized vehicles are prohibited except for agricultural vehicles. Outdoor amplification of sound is also prohibited. Outdoor music festivals are not permitted with this permit. The wastewater system would be approved by Douglas County Health. Registration for the agritourism business also needs to be registered with the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Park and Tourism prior to operation. And then condition that was added after the staff report would be that the safety inspection required with Lecompton Township Fire of the fire pit prior to the operation. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to stop sharing now.
I think you go back just down to the share screen and unshare. Stop sharing.
Oh goodness.
Here, I can do it for you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate that. Any questions for Tanya? No? Okay. Is the applicant wish to make a statement? Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go.
Can you hear us okay? Yes. Hi,
Yes,
I'm
hear ya.
Kristen.
Hi.
Just quickly, we'll keep this brief because Tanya did such a nice job. Thank you. That was very thorough. I suppose she talked all about what we're going to be doing, and we could just speak briefly about why we're doing it and address a couple of the points that she brought up. So, I mean, why we're doing it, as she mentioned, Brian has been a chef for the better part of 20 years.
Yes.
And I've been farming for about 12 or 13 years. And so when we decided to embark upon this business venture together, it was really kismet in lots of ways and really perfect and really natural for us to be able to do it. And the amount of work that has gone into it up to this point, and I've only been participating for a couple of years, but he's been at it for 5 out on the property. And the amount of work that's gone into it up to this point is truly a celebration of what it means to work on the land. And that's the biggest part about what we want to share with people is not necessarily to educate them to like, you can go home and do this too, but really give them an experience that they can see that people are still doing this. I mean, this is the way that our ancestors did this not too long ago, a generation or two ago in this country on this land. And the fact that we have 30 acres of native prairie out there and learning about that and how important it is to preserve that and maintain it and use it properly. And we had a woman come out. She lives just down the road from us, actually about 2 miles, Kirsten Bosnack. Currently she's the communications director with the KU Field Study Program. And she is a native prairie specialist and an ethnobotanist. And she came and walked the land with us about a month ago and was literally gasping at some of the species that she saw growing wild in our prairie, and the wild white indigo and the rattlesnake master and all the grasses. And we learned so much about what we had, and we just thought it was really beautiful. And we knew we needed to preserve it by way of land pasture management, high density stock grazing with the small amount of animals that we have. And it just to treat that respectfully and do it well. And that's a big part of what our business plan is. I mean, it's necessary to be able to pay it forward. And so I guess that's all I have to say. We're celebrating the land in the right way, and we want to be able to share that with as many people as possible. Now I'm going to go get a charge cord for the phone. And do you want to speak about the work you've done so far, Atlee?
Sure. So Nancy, you recognize me probably from the first time. It's good to see you again. So it's been 5 years since I kind of started on this journey, and it's going to be a lifelong event that I'm doing out there. This is something that we learn more and more every year from. Farming in itself is a whole other curve for me in life. I've been cooking for a long time, and so this is kind of the next evolution for me to be able to source my ingredients from the place that I can know where everything came from. Being in the industry as long as I have, I've seen kind of the decline on how much local food we actually source in our eating establishments. And to be able to create an establishment that sources nearly everything that we can from our own backyard or from the surrounding areas, that's the goal of everything. So for the last 5 years, we've learned on composting and the benefits of all the little chickens running around and the benefits of pasture management, how to pasture raise pigs and goats and turkeys and chickens, and the list is going to continue for us out there. And so we want to incorporate that all into an experience for people to come out and hang out and taste the difference between something that is raised like that versus something that's mass produced and sat before anyone can actually taste what it's supposed to be like. So that's what we're trying to do here, and that's the goal of our business out there. So we'll turn it over now, and we'll let the comments from the public come in, and then we'll address I guess this is how that works. We'll address what the commissioners have questions for us.
I do. Can I add one more thing? I would like to emphasize our intentions to keep this very small scale, especially in the beginning, especially given the conditions, the nature of things right now. You know, I mean, we had intentions to launch this spring, and the pandemic was something that prevented us from doing what we thought we wanted to do, which was have, 20, 40 people out for dinner, because we can do that. But I mean, we're capable of doing that. But now we're looking at it and we're seeing, one table on the patio under the awning of 8 to 10 people, an intimate setting where people can go out and have a really nice meal with close friends and family with the safety of being outdoors, because people just can't do that anymore given the environment. So that's we're not planning on having gigantic, loud events out there. It's going to be small scale, intimate, and very intentional gatherings of that sort. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicants, commissioners? Okay, we'll open it up for public comment. Sarah, is there anyone there at the courthouse who would like to provide public comment?
We do have someone here at the courthouse to provide public comment. So if you'll just pull up your chair, and you can see the commission and the microphone's on. So
yeah, hi. My name's Paul Hammersky. We live just to the north of the property, and we have some concerns because of, one, the gluten issues with my wife and the smell of cooking coming over to our property. And now we hear that there's going to be alcohol introduced into this also. My concern, because it's not going to be if it's going to happen, but when, because we're not going to be contained to our house, because my wife has already had to go inside a few times. We haven't said anything when he's been cooking over there occasionally. It's been very few times, but we're not going to live our lives in our house. So when there's an event and we call to shut down the cooking because we're smelling it, my wife has to be inside, there's alcohol involved. Now we're going to have irritated guests, wedding parties, people coming up to our house and harassing us, and I'm not going to deal with that very well. The hours have already changed from the paper they submitted to you guys. It was 11. Now they're saying midnight. I'm also concerned about what's the noise regulations in the county as far as codes. How late can they do noise? Because now they're wanting to stay up until midnight. So if they would get busy, that if they have events every weekend, multiple times, so we're going to hear, because it's an outdoor venue, we're right there. Trust me, we will hear everything. So we have to put up with that noise to midnight. I just don't think that's fair. So I want you guys to consider all that before you approve that. I'm not trying to stop them from their business, but I also want to be able to live our lives at our house and not have any ramifications from it also. So it just concerns me that late of hours, my wife has gluten issues and the smell coming up to our house from cooking. So I just have a few concerns on that, and I hope you guys take that into consideration.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing that with us.
So, and hopefully, if they are doing this, is there an FDA? Do they get involved as far as the establishment and as far as the cooking and all that stuff? Who monitors this stuff?
So Paul, we may have questions of the applicant, but we usually don't respond to questions that you have. We may ask the same questions to the applicant or to staff. But
I'm showing some concerns. I hope you understand that. So
sure. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And we'll have further discussions here in just a bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
do you want to speak? Okay, but you're still allowed to speak if you want.
My name is Sherry Hammersky, and I'm actually the one that wrote the letter. As my husband stated, this is, I would be a prisoner in my house if the gluten penetrates across that property line. I have been painting and maintaining our house and actually have had to go inside. It is not just a 24-hour, oh my gosh, I don't feel good. We're talking about weeks of being sick and being confined to bed. I have actually, again, in the letter I stated, I actually had to leave a career because it was not safe for me to be able to drive back and forth. It affects me severely. And as my husband stated, I don't want to be a prisoner in my house. I mean, it's hard enough, as you all are aware, is with this COVID, being confined, staying away from people, being socially distancing. I don't want to have to do that in my own home. I want to be able to get outside and be able to enjoy our land just as they want to enjoy theirs. I don't care what, you know, they can have weddings, they can have all of that. I'm not trying to stop them from fulfilling a dream, but I just want to be able to lead my life productively. And if the gluten penetrates and crosses our property line, it will affect me, and it will affect me drastically. I mean, I'm not trying to say anything, but like they're hogs or pigs, we can smell them on our property. And I get it, it's farm life. But if that penetrates our property line, then so is the gluten. Just as I stated in the letter about the noise, we can clearly hear conversations from that property. So if noise travels, so does gluten. So please, I'm begging for that consideration so that I can lead my life as well. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
That's everyone here.
Thank you, Sarah. Is there anyone online who'd like to provide public comment on this item? Do so just raising your hand. Not seeing anyone.
No.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Bring it back up to the commission for questions or comments or motions.
Well, I guess I'd wonder if the applicants would have any kind of response. This is obviously an issue between neighbors, and you have to live with each other for the foreseeable future. And so I don't know how you respond to that, but if you'd like a chance to respond to your neighbors, I think you have a right to right now.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Great. So I feel for my neighbor to the north there. And I have no intention on making someone sick. That's not my goal. Quite the opposite. The goal out there is to actually teach people how to become healthy. And the hard part that I have of understanding what the Hammerskis are talking about is that the issues that they have are all agricultural commodities. Gluten comes from barley, wheat, and those are agricultural products. And you've moved to an agricultural zoned area. So to create a limitation towards the production of gluten is to limit the production of wheat and barley and rye and grains that contain gluten. So there's no, I mean, that's the problem with their argument, is that they're arguing against agriculture and the production of agriculture. So I will do my best on maintaining our property, and I have done a wonderful job out there with that space. I feel for you, and I wish you didn't suffer from that affliction. I wish nobody had that stuff, but I have to move forward with this project and hope the commissioners can understand that statement.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Kristen. Sarah, can you, just a quick question, can you talk about noise? And this comes up a lot with these types of applications, and what the enforcement is for noise. Can you talk about that a little bit, or Tanya?
I would defer to Tanya on this.
So there is a noise ordinance in the county. That noise ordinance for just residential properties ends at 11 p.m. So any noise just beyond your typical farm or household noise can be called in to the sheriff's office after 11 p.m. And just to note, the hours of operation are not till midnight. They end at the same time as the noise ordinance. So Friday, Saturday, 12 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then Sunday would be 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we do get a lot of noise complaints here at the county on the enforcement side of things. And so we really try to balance that the best we can. We contact both property owners and we try to come up with a solution that works best for both of them, if there is a solution. And sometimes, you know, that goes way beyond our office and ends up a civil situation or ends up in the sheriff's office hands. If it is a condition, if the noise is a condition that we can enforce, because we do have some noise levels that are enforced on some of our CUPs, and they're enforced at different levels, so decibel levels or those type of things. Then at that point, then we have something that then we could bring back to the commission if they were not able to follow their own conditions and abide by them. But just general noise is a little bit harder, especially if you're trying to differentiate between, you know, agricultural equipment. We don't regulate that noise level. People's voices, you know, at just a talking level, we would not regulate that at all. So it would have to be something that would be, you know, they're having a concert out on this site. It's amplified, it's really loud, it's really bothering me. If it was during business hours, we would be able to go out and investigate. If it were not during business hours, they would call the sheriff's office.
Thanks, Tanya. Any other questions, comments, commissioners?
No.
I'll share that I was sort of interested in this airborne gluten question. I'd never heard of that before and reached out to the health department to understand if that was something that, you know, just because we don't monitor these things doesn't mean we shouldn't. And I wanted to make sure that this wasn't a growing area of research, that gluten was a concern. They looked at the articles, did a little bit of research on it, and felt like the risk was negligible, and you know, not saying that that's not going to have an impact on that family. I don't know the individual situation there other than what's been described tonight, but I just wanted to get, you know, our experts, you know, if there is a public health concern from airborne gluten, we want to address that. And at this point, the health department doesn't feel like that's a situation that we need to address at this point through code or anything like that. So I felt comfortable supporting the application, understanding that there are concerns.
So are you looking for a motion that's going to include I think there are 18 conditions, is that correct, Tanya? Is that what the commission's thinking, is approve it with those 18 conditions? Okay. I will move to approve a Tier 2 agritourism registration for an event venue at 292 North 2100 Road, Lecompton, for the Burning Barrel LLC.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All of those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Kristen and Brian, and thanks for members of the public, Paul, for coming and speaking with us. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is revisiting a site plan for SP 20-00177 for Sod Shop, North 1900 Road and East 1450 Road. And this one is Catherine Welk. Hi, Catherine.
Good evening. Are you ready?
We are ready.
Okay. I did not bring a presentation because nothing has changed in staff's recommendation or in the staff report. So I just want to recap where we are and how we got back from August 20th to this evening. So just to refresh everyone's memory, this is a site plan for the construction of the agricultural storage building and office for the sod shop located at the southeast corner of North 1900 Road and 1450 Road. And staff, as I mentioned, did recommend approval at your August 20th meeting. We did identify that the primary concerns with this particular project were the drainage issues for the area and the potential development. At your August 20th meeting, you all voted to defer for further study. And the two provisions for the further study was that the applicant was to work with the county engineer to address the issues related to both the area and the potential development for the project. And then as a result of that, that the applicant would then submit a revised site plan with relevant revisions as required based on that either drainage study or plan to address any drainage mitigations that they deemed necessary. So the applicant did provide a revised site plan, and if you need that, I can share our screen. I do have that ready. They did address the suggestions and plan that the county engineer worked with them on. And I'm not going to get into the details of the drainage issues. I will let the county engineer do that. One other thing I wanted to comment on is there was some, it was brought to staff's attention that there was some confusion about notification, and those that may want to comment on the project maybe didn't realize that they needed to get comments in by a certain time. So after it was determined which date this would be coming back before the Board of Commissioners, I did reach out to both the Kaw Valley Drainage District and to Charlie Novogradic and Debbie Milks, who had written in concerns specifically, and let them know that this item was coming back. And I believe the county engineer did that as well a few days after. So they did get personal contact from staff, letting them know that this item would be coming back and that they had the opportunity to address any additional comments or concerns that they might have. I have not received any communications. I'm not sure if any were submitted to the commissioners or submitted for the packet. They were given direct contact information if they chose to do that. So hopefully staff taking the extra step to reach out and make sure that they had that opportunity helped give them the opportunity to get those comments in if they so desired. So if there are no direct questions for me, although I'm happy to answer them if there are any specifics related to what the project was about, I think I might hand it over to Chad, who can talk about the solutions that they kind of came up with for the drainage elements, which were of concern for this particular area.
Okay, I think I'm sharing my screen now. Can you see the site plan?
Yes, yes, we can, Chad. Thanks.
Okay. I'm Chad Voigt, Douglas County Director of Public Works, and I did work on some standards that we could apply to this site, and I've just got a few slides I want to share with you here tonight to explain those. And I reached out to the applicant and Dean Grove, the engineer, to implement the changes to the site plan that would follow those standards. And what we see here is the revised site plan. This would be the most latest site plan. And what you see, I think you can see there we go. In the upper right corner of the site now, which is the northeast corner, there is a stormwater storage basin that has been expanded. Previously, there was just a drainage swale in that area, but this is a much larger basin. And the volume of that basin is really the issue that we've come up with, that we are targeting a standard to achieve with this site. And so what I'd like to do is kind of walk through that standard and give you some of the technical background that goes into that. And then we can maybe return to this with questions. While we're looking at this, I'll note that the whole site is hopefully draining to this basin. Downstream in this watershed would be to the east in the roadside ditch on N1900 road. When you look at this basin, it is 3 feet below the roadside ditch. And so it's basically a hole that would not drain away off the site. And so that hole would fill up, and then once that's full, then stormwater would start going down the ditch. Let me go to the next slide. So what we're proposing then is that for this site, we would apply a standard that would be specific to this watershed. And if you remember, Maple Grove watershed is a fairly large area that drains into North Lawrence and then down into the 2nd Street pump station. And this photo that we're looking at is actually the holding basin at the pump station. You can see the pump station in the distance down there. And you've probably seen this site, and it's actually a pretty common site to see water this deep in that basin. And it covers an area that's 2 or 3 blocks long, running back toward the north to the unincorporated areas. Here's an aerial view. And this shows down here at the bottom, very bottom of the screen is where that photo was. And Maple Grove tributary reaches up here. There's actually an arm that goes under the tracks and further up, but then this main arm runs over by the airport and over this way. And primarily the watershed is out here in this agricultural area all the way up to the county line. And then the site that we're reviewing tonight is right here. And so kind of dead center in this area. Obviously, this part of our county is all former river bottom. A lot of old river meanders are visible. A lot of sandy soils with high infiltration rates. And if you dig down a little bit in a lot of these soils, you actually just hit sand. So that's key to what we're proposing as far as a standard goes for managing runoff. So what we've come up with, is everybody still able to see and hear okay on this?
Yes.
Okay. So what we've come up with is a proposed standard that's specific to this watershed, the Maple Grove watershed. I gave a little bit of background at the top of this document about the 9,100 acre watershed draining to the Kansas River, but it's blocked by the levee and has to go through the pump station. And we do experience frequent widespread flooding in that area of the pump station and also upstream around the airport and all the low-lying areas and the relatively flat drainage ditches. In that case, you know, this is permeable agricultural soil, and when you change that to impervious, the impacts are much more dramatic than in other types of soil. So that's the concern. So the standard would be that developments in this area would have to control stormwater runoff with these numbered items here. And number 1 is kind of the whole nutshell. The site plan must include 1 or more stormwater storage basins to hold and retain the increase, which is proposed minus existing, in runoff volume generated by the development. And it's important to see that that's volume, not peak. Because those are 2 different things that are often dealt with in stormwater management. In this case, we're looking at volume, and it would be estimated for the 100-year 24-hour design storm. The 100-year storm is the level where we have floodplain mapping, and it's typically the level that we go up to in terms of trying to manage stormwater for communities. And then the 24-hour design storm is also consistent with what the floodplain maps were derived from. And it's a fairly common storm that can be modeled fairly easily. Number 2, existing and proposed runoff volumes must be estimated using HEC HMS with frequency-based storm event and precipitation data from NOAA Atlas 14. These are engineering terms that would guide someone like Dean or another engineer in running these calculations. HEC HMS is a really basic program that's been around for decades, and it's a pretty quick analysis. One of the keys here is I didn't want to create something that is very tedious and difficult and takes hours and hours and hours. So, because if it's difficult for the designer, then it's also difficult for the reviewer, and this really doesn't have to be that difficult. So That's one of the keys that is kind of going into this too. Runoff curve numbers must be estimated from land use and hydrologic soil group as outlined in NRCS TR 55, which is from 1981. So it's also been around a long time. Number 3, if soil properties allow the retained runoff, so this is the volume that we're going to store for the site, it must be infiltrated into the ground within 96 hours. And so this is stormwater that is not leaving the site. And that's a pretty dramatic change from what we normally do around this part of the country. Typically, we're allowing all the stormwater off-site, but we're just metering it through detention. In this case, we're saying we're going to grab it, we're going to hold it, and it's going to go in the ground. And the only reason that we can do that is, again, that we can expose some of those sandy soils in this area. So exposure of the subsoil or the installation of aggregate drains may be used to increase and maintain infiltration rates. And that would be occurring in the bottom of that basin that was visible on the site plan. If soil properties or groundwater levels prevent infiltration, and that's a distinct possibility, and then an outlet must be provided to empty the storage basin in not less than 72 hours. 72 hours, 3 days is the kind of timeline that would offset the long-term impacts to areas that flood downstream. If we can extend that stored runoff for 3 days, then that's the point where we can actually make a difference downstream. And so a lot of standards nationwide are referring to that approach as extended detention. So that would be the fallback. And if we can't put the water in the ground, then extend it out. And that notes that small pipe outlets or weirs will be required to control the discharge rate from the basin. Number 5, the entire developed site must drain to the storage basins. That's just making sure that we don't let things go uncontrolled. Number 6, once the storage basin is full, the additional runoff may be discharged. And that's making it clear that we're going to hold that specific volume. And once you've done that job, then the rest can be released and is allowed. And then number 7, the site plan must report the dimensions and areas of the proposed basin. And then 8 and 9 are notes that we want on the site plan, which have been added to this site plan. The first is noting that the infiltration basin is there and it's been designed to hold that water. And the second one is noting that it has to be maintained. So with that document, I'll look quickly. We'll try to do a little bit of technical explanation here. You know, the idea that impervious surface increases stormwater is displayed here in the form of rainfall and runoff hydrographs. And this is generated from the same model that is listed in those standards. And this is for the site that we're talking about. So in this case, it's an 8-inch rainfall in 24 hours, which is the blue line. And that fairly uniform peak in the storm with sort of pyramid shape, that's an idealized storm that is used in stormwater modeling. And in this case, it's a 100-year, 24-hour storm, which for that specific latitude and longitude, that storm is 8.03 inches of rainfall. And it has a distribution that looks like the blue line. The black line is the estimated runoff from the site before development. And then the red line is the estimated runoff after development. And so one thing to note here is that this site is still fairly agricultural. It'll have, of the 9 acres that was included in the drainage model, it's about 55% developed. So there's still quite a bit of cropland and green space. If you were to look at this graph right here for something in town like Walmart or something, that red line is much more dramatic. It's much more higher than the peak and greater than the breadth of it. When you look at these curves, this is again a hydrograph. The black line is the flow at a point in time. At the bottom of the screen are the hours of the 24-hour storm. And then anything under the curve, the area under the curve, represents the volume of runoff. And so the red line of the developed site has more volume. It also has a higher peak. So that's kind of the starting point for what you want to do to manage this stuff. And so what I've got here are the same the black line is the existing runoff. The red is the proposed runoff or the developed runoff. The dashed orange line is this proposed standard. And immediately you can see that it's got a fairly high peak, but at the start of the storm, we held all of this in that hole in the ground, that basin that's been graded. And so the net impact is that downstream, the total volume of runoff from the site will be managed so that it's not increased. If you look at hydrographs for developments of different sizes in different locations, they're all unique and have different characteristics. And if you are upstream from a neighborhood, you're worried about the peak. If there's an existing neighborhood that you're going to put a commercial site above, then the peak is very important because that's the kind of thing that overloads a storm sewer and might wind up flooding yards or houses. If you're in a situation like this site in North Lawrence or in Maple Grove watershed, the volume is really what matters because it's 3 hours before the floodwaters accumulate in the area downstream that would have a flooding problem. And so this little increase in the peak means nothing by the time you get, a mile downstream. It's really that net total volume of the runoff from the site that matters. And so it's a very subtle distinction, but we're holding the water down here in the basin and letting it peak here as kind of the sacrifice. And so it might be that the first couple hundred feet of road ditch see this higher flow and may have a small issue, but that's really okay. I've also got on here this black line down here, and I put that on there for perspective. That is the City of Lawrence detention standard that would have been applied to this site. And what that does is it knocks the peak down significantly. And again, the City of Lawrence standard is trying to help downstream areas that are developed. And that dramatically decreased peak is a huge benefit for several properties downstream in an urban area. But then all of the volume of the storm is let go through the basin and off the site. So what it basically does is it extends the flow out and all the volume still leaves. So this is zoomed in a little bit on the same, all of the same curves. The rainfall's gone. We've got, here's the peak if it was uncontrolled. Here's the peak with our storage basin. Here's the existing runoff. And here is detention. So just to get a kind of closer look. And back here early in the storm was the storage that we're proposing to put in there. So then looking at 5 inches of rain, which is basically a 10-year event. And so here's where this basin has been designed for a 100-year event, but it's going to have impacts for other storm events. And so dropping down to a 10-year event, we see a much greater impact because of the fact that we're holding the volume at the front end of the storm. Now we're seeing a huge volume of the storm, and the peak again is a little bit higher, but it's really following existing conditions in terms of runoff after that point. And then the great thing is, I'm going to flip to the next one. This is the 1-year event, so it should be expected that something like this will happen every year. That's 2.97 inches of rainfall in 24 hours. And you can see the dramatic impact that we're having with this approach. So while it's designed for the 100-year event, it has repeated benefits at this level. That's a massive amount of that storm that is taken out of the picture. It's actually, in this case, improving the watershed, to develop the site. Development is making an improvement. So those 3 levels are kind of the point of analysis that typically you would look at. You can choose other storms, but those 3 are pretty common. So to try to take maybe a simpler view here, these are those 3 storms again, and this is looking purely at volume. So the 1-year storm, the 2.97 inches of rainfall, the 10-year storm, the 5.14 inches of rainfall, and the 100-year storm, the 8.03. And then the green is the existing site before development. The orange is the site if it developed and didn't control the runoff. And then the lighter orange is the site with the proposed storage basin that would infiltrate in the ground. And so you can see that over here on the right, the 100-year event, we're basically matching the developed site with storage back to the existing site in terms of total runoff volume. For the 10-year storm, we're actually falling below the previous volume of runoff, and the 1-year storm also falling pretty dramatically below. And so that's kind of the net impact of this proposed standard. When you talk about these, I didn't label this as 1-year storm, 10-year storm, and 100-year storm. Those are often misused or misunderstood terms. A lot of people say, well, how can you have 300-year storms in a year? So that's why I made a point to put the depth of the rainfall on here instead. And I wanted to provide a little background on that. In the proposed standard, we're saying that we should reference NOAA Atlas 14 for rainfall. And this was information that was put out in 2014. And what you can do is go on the website for NOAA and find this and locate your site, and it will actually create this table. So this table is specific to the site at N900, 1900, and Highway 24. So if you look over here in the column for the 100-year storm, which is running up and down right here, all of those are 100-year storm events. And the reason that the term is often misunderstood is this is all statistics. So, you know, the people studying rainfall wanted to know for a 2-year-long or a 2-hour-long storm, how often does that come back for 4.61 inches of rain? So it's a 1% chance that a 4.6-inch rainfall for 2 hours will happen. And these are all data points in a statistical analysis. So these are all 1% storms. And if you flip that in the terminology, it's a 100-year storm. So that's a point that loses a lot of people. But if you're curious about, you know, how we choose those three, the 1-year, the 10-year, and the 100-year, it's really coming from this spread of data that we have at our fingertips, and something that often confuses people. So this is a prettier picture of the same stuff. So the blue is the 100-year, the dark blue here is the 100-year line. So these are the average return period of 100-year, these dark blue, the dark blue line running down here. So this is, I often say it's the family of 100-year storms. And so you could have, you know, a 2-hour storm down here that happens in April, and then you could have a 12-hour storm that happens in October. And those are statistically not going to happen again for 100 years, but they're, you know, each not going to happen for 100 years. So it's possible to have multiple 100-year events in a shorter time period. Another key factor here is that if you're in a neighborhood with a commercial site going in above, you're probably more worried about your 15-minute storm. And so you would design around rainfall down around this point. If you're on the Kansas River and you're worried about flooding adjacent to the levee, you're going to be looking more like a 10-day rainfall history right here. So that's where you can get into some variability about which one of these you use. And so the 24-hour kind of falls in the middle here and represents a pretty good approximation for what we're trying to do with this watershed, and the fact that it would flood pretty dramatically over many, many hours. So that is all the information that I've pulled together, and I hope I haven't lost anybody, but let's go back to the site plan at the top, and then I guess briefly, if you have questions about how this is being implemented or what we're trying to do, now would be the time.
Questions, commissioners?
I do have some questions for Chad, and one just based on what you were just telling us. I know that it seems like in recent years we've talked about, with climate change, having much more heavier rainfall events it seems as though we've had events that have been called not 100-year, but actually 500-year rainfall events. Is that just people exaggerating, or have we been having more rainfall events that are beyond that 100-year?
We have had some rainfall events that have exceeded the 100-year mark and hit maybe the 200 or the 500-year mark. And it depends, you know, if it's a storm that's over a 5 square mile area that lasts 3 hours, you know, a lot of times those don't show up on the data that you can look at online for the weather stations, because you can only download like 6 or 12 or 24-hour data. So you'll hear somebody say, you know, that they were just hammered by rainfall, and tell you what they got in their rain gauge, and you go back and look and it has to be more than 100. It could be a 500. Again, that's a data point on that table that has many, many data points. So I think, you know, the larger maybe question is it changing? And I think the answer is yes, it's getting more intense, and climate change is driving that. And that's one big reason that there was an update in 2014. So when they make flood maps nowadays, they're using 2014 data instead of 1970s data. And I could see that changing again.
So I guess that's the question is, I know that this new standard that you're setting up, proposing to set up for this watershed is an improvement over having virtually no standards for stormwater management. But I guess I'm wondering, and as someone who lives out there and sees what happens with the, you know, fairly frequent, very heavy storms, and I think storms beyond the 100-year mark, if these new standards kind of, what happens, for instance, with this site plan, if you have that 500-year storm?
Right, and it would still do the job that it's set out to do in storing that initial part of the storm. But then once it's overloaded, it's going to overload just like everybody else out there. Let me flip to slide, that last one, because one of the things about these different magnitude storms, if you think about the 3 inches of rain on the existing site, it was about 45% runoff. The 8 inches of rain on the existing site is about 75% runoff. Once you have rainfall that heavy, the ground has reached its saturation point and it will not infiltrate anymore. And so as the storms become larger and larger, the impacts of development actually don't increase at the same rate. There's a lesser impact for a larger storm. And that's kind of evident here in the fact that the white space above these three is kind of the same in all of these, regardless of the rainfall depth. So it's the small storms that people notice runoff pretty, frequently and really obvious impacts. The larger storms, they occur less frequently, but the impacts are also harder to quantify.
Well, so I guess my question would be, with this site plan, with this design and these standards, it's designed so that after 72 hours, if the water hasn't drained, and certainly there have been, gatherings of water out there that haven't drained for many days, let alone just 3 days. A week, 2 weeks can go by and the same standing water is there because the ground is absolutely saturated and Maple Grove tributary is full. But it's designed so that once water is supposed to be released, to drain the it's not a detention pond or a retention pond, but now a storage basin. So where is the water going to go that you're intending to release if everything is saturated and water is standing still?
In this case, the site, I studied the soil maps, and the soil maps clearly show that the infiltration rate down 30 inches below the surface is 10 times higher than the infiltration rate at the surface. And so the fact that we're 3 feet in the ground opens up this bottom foot or so of sandy soil. And so at that higher infiltration rate, that stored volume will go down into the ground, and roughly in 96 hours. The standard that we're proposing, I'll flip to that. If the soil properties allow, retained runoff must be infiltrated in the ground within 96 hours. Exposure of subsoil or installation of aggregate drains may be used to increase and maintain infiltration rates. So then number 4 is the alternate. So if there's groundwater present, that's not going to work. Or if they happen to be in where there's clay lens or some soil that doesn't work, then we have to give them an option. So the option is to provide an outlet. And in that case, this basin would be built up higher, 3 feet higher, with basically a small dam and a small outlet pipe. And then that's the case where we would say it has to be held for 72 hours and trickle out of there. So it's extended detention. And if you've got groundwater or clay soil close by, there's really no way to do anything. And that's, I kind of said this in the past, development changes runoff, and there's really nothing you can do. So in that case, if they're in that situation where the groundwater's there, the soil's not allowing it or something like that, this is the absolute best that they can do. And in that case, it would discharge to the ditch, and it would be over a 72-hour period. And, that's asking a lot of a property owner. And it's, I think, quite a bit of effort to offset the impact of development at that point.
Do you, I certainly don't know the ground levels there and where groundwater typically is and how frequently groundwater, the river level is so high that groundwater is just a few feet below the soil surface. I know there are times when you can, with a hand shovel, get down to groundwater, sometimes out in that area. So do you know how frequently, how often the situation would arise where the groundwater is not going to allow the water to seep in? Is that a rare event, or is that pretty common? Because I have to say, living out there, it looks, even now, there's a lot of standing water.
Right. And it's site specific, and I'm not familiar with this site beyond just studying the topo maps and the soil maps. But I know that this site is several feet higher than the kind of drainage channel that is a half mile away. And so there is a little bit of elevation there to work with. My assumption would be that the groundwater might be high on this site if the river is up in the levee, that there's going to be that subsurface flow of river water that might bring groundwater levels up. And in that case, I think everybody's going to experience flooding. If they happen to get a major storm event while that river flood is also happening, then it's at that point you have to kind of step back and say, well, it's not really the development that has created this problem. It's the fact that we've got this storm and flood and just condition where there's too much water to deal with. So that site, I think this might work. The case that you're talking about might be that by the main channel of the drainage basin down by the airport, there's always going to be groundwater right there. So if the site were down there, then this would not work.
So I have a couple of other questions, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation here. So if the other commissioners have any questions, I'd sure like to hear them.
I don't. I think you're covering it fine, Commissioner Thelman.
This is Sarah. I don't know if I can ask kind of a point of clarification, and we do have someone here for public comment. So, Chad, are you proposing that these standards be adopted in conjunction to the existing application, but then to make them a stormwater management standard that is adopted for the county for after this? I'm just a little concerned that we haven't necessarily noticed that, you know, on an agenda, and the public didn't know that we would be adopting stormwater management standards tonight. So we would maybe want to do that on a future agenda. Am I making sense in terms of process?
Yeah, let me point out that what we're proposing here is specific to this watershed, specific to developments on these sandy soils, and it would not be an adopted standard. It would be, I don't even think it makes the point of being a policy. I think in the zoning code, it currently says that a site plan has to provide drainage calculations as required by the county engineer. And that's under the site plan section of the zoning code. It's also under the CUP section of the zoning code. And so what I'm trying to do here is spell out for this applicant and possibly for others like this applicant in this area, what an acceptable standard would be to manage the concerns of stormwater runoff. So we have not adopted, and I didn't really intend to adopt standards either for this area or countywide. This certainly would not apply countywide. It's really only possible to do this in this small area. So if we want to stay with simply the idea that the county engineer is going to require that we manage stormwater for any site, and that at this site this is how it's going to be done, I think that this may be enough to complete that step.
Okay, I think that's helpful for me in terms of this. I maybe would have labeled it something a little bit different than Maple Grove Stormwater Management Standards. I would have maybe just said, you know, county engineer standards for this particular application. But if that's what we're saying this is, I think we're fine. But I also I just want to clarify that.
Well, I think there's an expectation that if we do this for this applicant, that the next person in the door should be handed the same document. And that's why, you know, I thought I should at least refer to it as a standard, but I was also thinking it should be Maple Grove only. Just kind of gets us all on the same page in a small area.
Yeah, and I would just say that if our intention is to be upfront with other potential applicants in the Maple Grove watershed, that we should probably also have this conversation on a separate agenda where we've talked about it, so that planning staff and everyone is aware, and just so that there's public comment on that, just from that perspective. I don't think we change anything we're doing here tonight for this particular application. I just think if we want to set this moving forward, we probably should bring it back on a future agenda, and allow the public an additional opportunity to come in and review that.
And on that note, we do have another site plan under review in this watershed that has an approval condition that they have to meet with the county engineer to resolve stormwater issues.
Is that making sense, commissioners, from what I'm saying in terms of some process, in terms of here tonight?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, Sarah, because I was trying to figure that part out. I was going to sort of wait until we got all the technical questions answered. So I I think it's a fair question. It may even be worth a study session. I know that stormwater detention in that part of the county is a critical issue, and I get a little worried about. I mean, I sort of hear what Chad is saying about, well, I'm going to apply it to this one, and then we want to let others know. But that starts to sound like a standard to me, and so I think we just sort of need to talk about when does a standard, or maybe it's a plan that comes into place. It's not necessarily that. It's a tricky situation. So we want to be upfront with folks, but we also want to give Chad the latitude to look at properties individually for the needs of, because they're all going to be very different depending on how large they are, what kind of materials they're using, and things like that. That's just my 2 cents.
So, yeah, I think it's worth a study session. It's so complicated out here, and I think we want to make sure that in support of Chad's work, make sure we're not setting him up or setting the county up or the folks in North Lawrence up for any unintended consequence of kind of making policy, but not really making policy. I think we need to be really careful with this. I have a few more questions, of course, if you all don't have any. Chad, early on when we talked about this, the experience out there has always, in terms of stormwater treatment and the pooling of water, the retention ponds and detention ponds, usually that there are times when the FAA has regulations around the detaining water, keeping large bodies of water around because of the waterfowl mitigation. So as not to attract waterfowl and have them colliding with planes that are trying to land at the airport. And there have been some instances of near misses, and really it's a really serious situation. And so you and I talked about this when this started, and you said that a retention pond is allowed by the FAA. Is that also true of a storage basin, or have you gone more into detention with the storage basin?
Well, the storage basin would be a retention pond, and the alternative would be the detention pond. And I think in general, the detention would be allowed on the FAA review because it's fairly short duration of pooled water. This would be a retention pond, which is longer term storage, but the time period that this storage area would have water in it would be similar to the time period that all of the roadside ditches would be flooded, all of the Maple Grove tributary itself would be flooded, and it's much closer to the airport. And so, you can kind of think about this in simple terms, that we're taking the pooled runoff flooding of Maple Grove, and we're grabbing and holding some of it back over here in this pocket instead of letting it stand in that pocket. And so that's where I tend to think the FAA standard, it's not something that you would say that this can't happen because of the airplane's risk with waterfowl. I think it's going to be flooded so many places that if that's a concern, then it's a concern that has to be dealt with somewhere else or differently.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. That's always, retention and detention has always been, I've had a hard time remembering which was which, but so this isn't anything that you would think the Airport Advisory Board, City of Lawrence, Stormwater Management, this just is outside of that concern then?
Yeah, I mean, the area of this is like 60 feet across by 100 feet long, and it's, relative to the other flooded areas, very small. So I would say no. I mean,
okay.
I could be wrong, but that would be my, that would be my interpretation.
Okay. Would you mind going back to the site plan? I was noticing, maybe it's on this, on the second one where it has all of the enumerated notes from the engineer from.
Yeah, let me see if I can get that for you. You able to see that okay?
Yeah, thank you. So I was, this is maybe a little bit random because I think the stormwater issue is the probably the most critical, but I was just looking through these and I wondered on number 9, it talks about only in the second sentence of number 9, it says only limited grading will be performed for the proposed building remodel. What does it mean by building remodel?
I believe that might be a note that came from some other project. Maybe Dean could let us know if that's the case.
So
yes,
that
Dean Grove Engineering. Chad's right. I probably had something or was typing, and rather than just building construction, a typo of remodel in there. It's all new construction. I apologize for that.
okay. And also it's in 13, it says, it talks about having proposed direct access to and from US Highway 59 and 24 may be provided on a proposed location as shown. I remember the first time we looked at this, there was a proposed future access to 59 Highway. Is that still part of this plan or am I missing it?
Again, Dean Grove, I removed it on Chad's request. The owner had maybe at some point with his business anticipated maybe an entrance off of Highway 59. Obviously that's down the road and not really a critical part of the site plan, and so I removed it, but that would go through a whole KDOT process if that was desired in the future.
Okay, so I would think 13 would need to be removed as well.
I would say yes. I apologize.
I just don't think we
and didn't think about that note.
Yeah, I just don't think we want there to be any assumption that access onto 59 is granted on this site plan.
I agree.
Let's see. Oh gosh, and I've just seen a note here. I'm so sorry. Commissioner Kelly, in the beginning when we started this, I should have noted an ex parte communication. Is it okay if I offer that up now?
Of course, we haven't voted yet. You're still
okay.
Here. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I really apologize because I'm just reading through my almost illegible notes, and I see I forgot to do this. But I did have an ex parte conversation with Wade Wilbur a couple of times, some phone calls and some texts after I guess maybe last week, and to let him know about an industrial property that will be on the market on 59 Highway, pretty close to this parcel, and suggesting that might be building already on site, quite a large parcel. And he was going to be checking into it. And we had a couple of back and forth conversations about that. He was going to check with the county appraiser and kind of do some research on that. So that was kind of an interesting discovery and some good. I have to give Mr. Wilbert credit for having some good open conversations and some willingness to look into that possibility as a potential different site to consider for this very large for this business. So I needed to say that before we went any farther. Thanks, Patrick. So I don't think I have any more questions right now, and thank you for your indulgence.
This is usually when we would take comments from the applicant or a representative of the applicant.
Very good. This is Dean Grove Engineering. I guess first applaud Chad on his efforts. You know, again, here we kind of stumbled onto this and trying to derive some standards or guidelines that we use. And they were somewhat specific to this site because that's all they had to kind of look at this point. It worked out that we were able to adjust the site to accommodate those. I will say that even before we made the detention pond, that area where the retention storage infiltration basin is, that had created a low depression for the storage of the water produced by the development, and took it one step farther to dig a little deeper and hold it for infiltration. So I want you to understand that, you know, it wasn't that we didn't do anything to begin with. And in the way it worked out, we were able to accommodate it, the additional requirements in this situation. I do appreciate what Chad said, and I know I've heard the same thing of 100-year storms. Well, there's a lot of 100-year storms. You can have a 100-year storm that lasts for 5 minutes, and we have a lot of those. But you know, when people think of a 100-year storm, it's usually in a 24-hour or long term. That a 100-year storm can flood a little property for a little few minutes, and then it's gone. Versus a 100-year storm could flood your property for a long duration. But also, I want to go back to what Chad said, that what we've done by producing this infiltration basin, any extra runoff that is produced by the impervious surfaces are really taken out of the equation by the infiltration basin. So really, it's any runoff is no more than what it would be if it was remained an agricultural field. So we have accomplished that. You know, so it is doing some benefit, and I think he tried to point out that it's based on a 100-year storm. So while this big basin is there, every storm less than that, it's doing more than, you know, holding the rain, because it's a bigger basin. So if we have a 2-inch rain, 99% of it's going into that basin to be infiltrated. You know, it's only kind of a square one if it's a 100-year, 24-hour storm event. So there's a lot of good things with this and what we've done, again, using the 100-year storm. So, and with that, again, I think Chad's done some great work, but I think we may have to look at some other sites and just see how, you know, a different site that are these quote standards or guidelines fit quite as well on a smaller site or a mostly developed site that we're bumping a little bit or something else. So I'd be happy to work with Chad. And again, I think he did a great job of explaining it. And I think we brought a good project to you, that we've accomplished the goals. I apologize for a few of those notes. Sometimes I'm sorry, I can read a note and think it's clear as a bell and then read it a day later and it's wrong. So I can correct those, any of those notes that may not be perfect. And I'll answer any questions.
So So this is Nancy. I have a question probably for both of you, Dean and for Chad. On the site plan, there's a future building, equipment storage building that is surrounded by the impervious surface, but there's a note on it that says that the stormwater, that building is not included in the stormwater calculations. So if this were to go forward with the current plans with the storage basin and all of the current what's drawn, and then that building is approved at a later date, then the stormwater off of that large building, does that mean that you go back and widen out, make the storage basin larger to take care of the runoff, the impervious surface added by that building?
That is correct, or some other area that we're doing an infiltration basin, or some design in the future that accomplishes that more than digging that basin out. Maybe it's another basin on the other side or something, but yes, enlarging that basin, probably not the bottom. It would just be expanded to the south a little bit along the property line.
And by having that future equipment shed on this site plan, this site plan then is giving approval of that future building?
Commissioner Thellman, this is Catherine Week. That it doesn't necessarily give that dimension, that specific layout. It basically is just earmarking that area for potential development later. They would still have to go through some process to nail down the exact dimensions, whether or not that triggers any more parking or any more detention ramifications for the site. So it's basically just showing what their intention is. It's not approving because we don't know what that is currently. It's just showing the general location. So there would be some additional process for them to hone in on those details. And Chad can elaborate on the drainage piece of it.
Thank you. Chad?
Yes, you want to hear more?
Yeah, well, I guess since stormwater runoff and where the water goes is what this is all about, and we have another large building shown on this site plan, but no, not sure. I guess I'm just a little concerned about that large of another addition to the impervious surface without.
Right. And the fact that it's labeled future and dashed lines, I think that's been the protocol for site plans for a long time, that indicates not currently approved, but maybe we'll ask for it later. And that's evidenced down here in the surface summary that summarizes the square footages. So proposed buildings, 35,000 square feet. And that's this building. So if they were to add that later, this would all have to be updated. They'd have to update the table with the numbers. They'd have to show the building that's being added. And then in terms of drainage, I think this would be a decision for the applicant, but I would think that this area just north of the building could be graded to hold additional runoff. So it would have to be incorporated later.
So the road front on 1900, the what's shown as kind of the widening of the ditch along 1900 is not for this current project, but is for the future one?
I think the grading that's shown here is for the current site plan, and there would just be sort of a flat spot there. that would be lawn area until a future time.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, commissioners? Okay, let's open it up for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment on this item? Anyone there at the courthouse, Sarah?
Yes, commissioners, we have one person here for public comment.
Thanks. And Chad, if you could take the site plan down, stop sharing your screen.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Ted Boyle, President of North Lawrence Improvement. And I would like to express the concerns of the residents and the businesses in North Lawrence. And we just don't want to have an event that happened in '93, where the water from Grant Township, the airport, Ham's Quarries, come in and inundated North 2nd Street, North 3rd Street from Johnny's to the entrance of the turnpike. As a result, that water came from the county, not the city. And, you know, 2 years later, got a pump on North 2nd Street to take care of that water from that area. And 20 years later, we got a pump on 5th and Maple to take water from the neighborhood. Now that pump on North 2nd Street does not take any water whatsoever from the neighborhood. That's strictly North 2nd, North 3rd Street. So the one on 5th and Maple, now that does all the residential and Lions Park and does not take any water from 1500 Road to 24 Highway. Never has and probably never will. And as far as the soil in North Lawrence, I tell you, I've been on the Citizens Advisory Board at ICL, Astaris, FMC, whatever you want to call it. And I got indoctrinated on groundwater through those people. The arsenic plumes that they had out there that they're cleaning up, and pretty well got it accomplished according to KDHE. Now, the groundwater under North Lawrence flows 2 foot a day from Jefferson County Bluffs out there and Ham's Quarry, 2 foot a day, and it's 50 feet deep. It's sand, 50 feet. And that water flows through there, and that's why you won't see the sand pits, Ross's Pond, or the little pond on 1500 Road. You won't see them go dry because the water passes through those bodies of water, and they're so deep. The sand pits is because they sucked sand out of there and for so long. And the little pond on North 1500 Road, North 7th Street, that got created by the 51 flood, and it's close to 50 feet deep. And so the water passes under North Lawrence every day, 24/7, and it's controlled by the height of the river. If the river's up, like it was in '93, it pushes that water back. And what it did in '93, there were several places in North Lawrence, and especially on the other side of the tracks, which is 14 to 15 feet lower than the south side of the tracks. It created these boils, these water boils. The river was pushing the groundwater back upstream, and it would erupt through the ground. So there's putting a detention or a retention pond on top of a pond don't make too much sense, unless it's a permanent body of water. And then releasing it in the Maple Grove Drainage District to come down North 2nd Street. The residents and businesses have great concern about this and want to know why North Lawrence has to mediate the county's water. Why does that lay upon the city and North Lawrence? So, you know, when the stormwater study, the one of '03 or '04 was done, there was about $45 million between North Lawrence and Grant Township. There was about 15 million that needed to be done in the city limits of North Lawrence. There was 25 million they estimated needed to be done in Grant Township before any development could be done. Well, if you go back and look at that old stormwater study, you'll see that there was a pump, a stormwater pump mentioned at TP Junction, right around in that area, on the north side of 24 Highway, like around where the cemetery is, or used to be the highway department. The old stormwater, well, old now, 203, they suggested that a pump be put in there and stop the water coming north under the highway into Maple Grove Drainage District into North Lawrence. Now, the drainage district goes all the way up to the, the airport, the west side of the airport. Not hard to see. It's got water standing in it today. And so water does not percolate down in the ground if there's water underneath of it. And when the river's up, the groundwater's up. So it can't soak in the ground. And a good example of that is Pine Farms, the sod farms. You go out there after it rains for, it rains a couple inches or something like that. Those fields have got water standing in them. The ditches will have water standing in them for a couple of weeks. And so, we're not opposed against the development out there, as long as, the Northeast Sector Plan, I worked on it with Nancy and before she became a commissioner. And, Grant Township and North Lawrence partnered together to get the agricultural status that it has today. And, the only thing that could have industrial out there was the airport, and it had to be aviation type of industry. The rest of it had to be agricultural. So the deal is, if you take care of the stormwater problem, which means not letting it come into North Lawrence, period. We don't want the water. And that 5th Street pump that was just put in 7 years ago, the city has not completed the ditching direction that they were supposed to. It only takes water about 4 blocks away from that pump. $7 million, that pump's sitting there, and it takes water 4 blocks away because the city won't throw enough money at North Lawrence, but that's going to change. So we don't want any county water to come down 1500 Road, 7th Street to that pump. That's not our responsibility to take care of county's problem. That is the county's problem. So this deal with groundwater, the river controls the groundwater. I should say that way. The river controls the groundwater. When the river's up, like right now, the river's so low that I can take you over to North Street, a farmer friend of mine, and he's got a little hand dug well, and it's about 12 feet deep, and he can suck all the water out of that thing he wants to year round. Right now, he can't because the groundwater is so low. But when the river comes up, I've seen it where it's brim full. And so water can't percolate in the ground when the underground groundwater is up so close to the surface. I live in the highest spot in North Lawrence, 310 Elm. I'm right next to the levee. And I have a well. I preserve this well, and it's under my deck, and I use it to water my lawn and stuff. And I want to tell you, normally it's about 20 feet to the surface. Right now it's a little further than that, but when the river's up to running stage, it's 12 feet, 14 feet, and it fluctuates that much, the groundwater in North Lawrence. So North Lawrence and Grant Township are very unique, county and citywide. So any development that happens to the north of us, the groundwater, I mean, the stormwater has to be taken very, very seriously. You know, we've waited too long since we got the big pump put in. The only thing, we had three pump outlets in North Lawrence. And, well, one of them, we just got put in 95, and then the underpass. And then we had a little 9-inch pipe where the big pump got installed on 5th Street, and it's a 54-inch pipe and goes into a 60-inch pipe through the levee. And there's like 3 pumps there. And we haven't had any flooding in North Lawrence at all. So, and that's the result of this. Now, in the 90s, the city let developers build houses on toadstools. You might drive through North Lawrence and you see houses sitting on mounds, and then the house next to it is ground level, and then they dug the ditches 5 feet deep and 4 feet wide, trying to get rid of the water. Well, that didn't work. And so in 08, passed the sales tax on the infrastructure, and by 2015, 16, they started construction on that pump. So that's the history of that. And so be very, very careful. I mean, you can build out there, but take care of the stormwater so that it doesn't come across 24 Highway and TP Junction into the Maple Grove Drainage District. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted. Whoops, is there anybody else for public comment there, Sarah?
Not at the courthouse.
Anybody online like to provide public comment on this item?
I'm not seeing anyone.
Thank you, Jill. Let's bring it back and give the applicant a chance to respond to public comment if they like.
Dane Grove, Grove Engineering. I guess I don't have any great comments other than one of the things that Ted said. If you're handling your stormwater, they're not against development. And I think based on Chad's requirements, we've accomplished that. So, you know, again, I think it's, he's right. I mean, all of Grant Township, there's a lot of areas that need some work. I have heard several instances where people are talking about the water sitting in the ditches. Well, I guess I don't take the same opinion in that, you know, that's where we want the water to sit, you know, for a certain amount of time. Now, yes, after multiple durations of rain, you know, it sits in the ditches longer than we want, but if it's sitting there, it will infiltrate. And I will say one thing to Ted's comments: if the water level is higher than the groundwater, it will soak in. You know, if there's water below, it doesn't, you know, the head of water will drive it in. Now, again, the differential head reduces the rate at which it goes in. But again, I think we accomplished on this project of taking care of any additional stormwater. And again, the situation where we're improving it far more on any storm event less than 100-year, 24-hour storm event. So.
Thank you. Chad, just a question I had to Mr. Boyle's concerns. I mean, one of the, in the way that you evaluated, was that the water would go into the soil. Did you consider it? If he's saying that it's pushing up as the river comes up, it won't go down. I mean, water doesn't go into water. So, you know, did you take that into consideration when you were dealing with those, when you were coming up with those standards, or I don't know what we're calling them now, guidelines, whatever?
Guidelines, that's good. Yeah, so we looked at the soil map. I dug in a little deeper on the soil map to look at what it said about layers in the subsoil, the B horizon of the soil. And again, the infiltration rate down there was 10 times higher than the surface. The soil map doesn't know whether there's groundwater immediately present at a shallow depth at a specific site. You'd have to go out there and dig down to know that. But what I would say is, if there is groundwater that close on any site, that development has no impact. So if you've got groundwater 12 inches below the soil and we have any rainstorm, you're generating 100% runoff. If you pave that, you're generating the same runoff. So this guideline would take a site that can infiltrate water and it would offset development impacts. So, you know, there is going to be a huge benefit to holding water at the source rather than letting it migrate downstream. And if it's migrating into the ground a half a mile away at a higher elevation, that helps those people in those critical areas where that pump station is overloaded downstream and in the city.
Thanks. Any other questions, commissioners, before we do final comments and motions? No, maybe I'll get it started. This is a tricky area. I mean, it's just such a tricky area, and you know, I can see the desire to do no development at all, so that we have no deeper impacts. I think one of the things I was encouraged with Chad's models is we actually may be making a positive impact on the stormwater issues with some of the guidelines that he's suggesting, and getting some of those stormwater issues more under control. So in a way, development may be good to get some of these issues under control. I really would like to have a study session on this to understand more. Chad, I thought you did a great job of explaining a very complicated subject for folks. But I mean, it's really like on so many of these planning issues, it's a balance between, do we want, you know, balancing growth against the impacts that it's going to have to stormwater, and how that impacts neighborhoods. Mr. Boyle is correct in saying that flooding is a problem in that area. I will disagree a little bit. It's not county water or city water. Water doesn't know those boundary lines. And so I think we all have to do our part to try to deal with this as climate change becomes more and more of an issue. We're going to have to figure out how to, retaining water, getting rid of water is going to be just a huge part of what we're up against. And when we're this close to the river and the impacts that it has when it rises or falls, it is going to impact all of our properties in that area. So this is a tough one. I would say that I'm supportive of it because I think we've done all we can to try to address these stormwater issues. I was sort of teased by Commissioner Thelman's comment that Wade may have found a different spot that's already developed, but I don't know that, you know, Dean didn't say anything about that, and I don't know that the applicant is ready to withdraw their application at this point. So those are my initial thoughts.
Well, I agree. This is tough, and I want to compliment Chad and Dean for working well together, and Catherine. You know, we've put you all through through a lot of extra exercises here to try and get something right. I guess I would say from my perspective and from my experiences out here, both before being a commissioner, you know, being part of the citizens who worked really hard to recognize that this area out here in Grant Township is unique for its soils, but also unique for its stormwater. You know, the tendency to gather water out in Grant Township and then send it flooding down to North Lawrence. It was always interesting to me that the prime soil argument took hold much more than the stormwater, the flooding argument, but probably the flooding is really the more important one in terms of public health and safety, and just the quality, the roads and the properties and values and all of that. So I guess it landed hard on me a long time ago that water is going to go where it wants to go, and we're getting more and more rain events of heavier nature, and the 500-year storm or the 200 or 300-year storms are not rare anymore. They're not routine, but they're not rare. And so I guess I'm just reminded that this is a parcel that's located in Tier 3 of our comprehensive plan. It's not envisioned to develop within the lifespan of the plan. It's not an area, I think, where we're obligated to promote development. Rather, we're kind of, in a sense, discouraged to promote development by our comp plan as well as the sector plan and the North Lawrence drainage study that really says that flood infrastructure needs to be in place before significant development occurs. And really high functioning flood infrastructure is not in place. The Maple Grove tributary drainage system is pretty static, and it's almost always full of water. I do know that our Northeast sector plan made a point of saying we wanted to encourage ag, and if anything was to be developed in this area, it would need to be of an agricultural nature, an agribusiness, and so this is an agribusiness. So that's the difficulty, but I guess my issue with this is not your typical ag building. This is an enormous building. This is a building whose roof is almost an acre large, which is as large as a football field. And so in this whole property, you're turning a 20-acre parcel, 25% of it becomes impermeable or impervious. And I guess I'm not sure that's what what I envisioned in terms of appropriate ag, encouraging ag development in this really delicate ecosystem out here. An acre large roof is something of a game changer for that parcel. But I appreciate, Chad and Dean, that you've worked to create a hole deep enough to hold the water until it overflows. I think it will overflow. And I guess lastly, I would just say that I think if this is approved, I think we are putting out the welcome mat for the next project and the next project and the next project. And I know that that's not Wade Wilbur's problem, but that will be a problem for Grant Township and for North Lawrence as we find ways to make development possible before really the entire system is ready to support development. So that's my concern. I'd be interested to hear what Commissioner DeRusso thinks, but I think you can tell that although I'm super appreciative of the hard work that's gone into this, and I do agree this deserves a study session before more development is entertained. I don't feel obliged to develop this area, and so I'm probably not going to be supporting it.
Commissioner Thelen, can you, or maybe this is a question for Catherine, can you help me? You mentioned Tier 3, and so if this was a rezoning, I would be thinking that's where I would apply this, but this is appropriately zoned. Am I correct? I mean, this isn't a request for rezoning. This isn't a conditional use permit. When I think of, I don't usually, this is a site plan approval. So help me understand where we apply some of that logic to a site plan approval.
Yeah, you're correct. It is zoned appropriately. And typically we talk about growth areas when we are talking about rezoning to accommodate types of businesses that were not anticipated in the comprehensive plan. I might also mention too that if I mean this is triggering the site plan because they have a small office with some parking, and it rises to the level where the development is triggering the site plan. If this were just an ag storage building, same size, same footprint, it could qualify for the ag exemption, and it would not even come before review for any process. So the site plan process and the fact, you know, that they're having that small office, which does trigger some additional parking, surface summary tables, is giving you the opportunity to kind of mitigate any impacts that it has. But I mean, just strictly based on size and it's being zoned appropriately for an ag business, this ag use could happen if they didn't have the additional things that are triggering that site plan. If it was just a 35,000 or even a 40,000 foot building, just to store tractors, combines, that type of thing, it wouldn't even be before you. It could qualify for that ag exemption, and it could have gravel surfacing. It could have some of the same things that we're seeing on the site plan. So you're correct. It is a site plan, not a rezoning, and it is zoned appropriately for the use that they're proposing.
Yeah, I guess I just look at site plans as being very technical, you know, and does it meet the technical, and I don't want to use one process to do something else. And, you know, I don't know that I agree with Commissioner Thellman that this is going to set the tone for that area going forward, because I think we have zoning in place now, thank goodness, that, you know, maybe we'll do that. But I just worry about putting an applicant there and saying, well, this isn't the right kind of business for this area when it is zoned correctly. And that the site plan process makes sure we have things like water retention in place, like, you know, an appropriate entrance and exit, you know, good fencing and things like that. So those I feel like the applicant has addressed those concerns.
Sorry, having trouble with my unmute. Yeah, when we this first came before us last month, I was really struck by the pictures, some of the pictures of the flooding and the issues out there, because well, I'm familiar with the area. I'm not nearly as familiar with it as Commissioner Thellman is. So I had some concerns. I was, you know, thank you, Chad, Catherine, and Dean for working together and coming up with what appears to me, and the way I understood the explanation, is a solution that's not going to make matters, it's not going to improve anything out there, but I don't think it's going to do any more harm. It looks like you found a way to hold that water and keep it at a level, or even a lower level than what's occurring now when we get these rainfalls. So I do appreciate that. And, you know, while it's difficult, like Catherine said, you know, this is an ag building that could be done anyway, and we never would have even seen it. I'm glad that we did, because it did enable Chad and Dean and Catherine to work together to control some of this water that's going to run off. So, you know, I'm pleased with what they came up with. And well, it's a very difficult situation, a very difficult and challenging area as far as the rainfall and and water flow, I think that I'm satisfied with their solution.
I just want to say I'm happy to take credit for process facilitation, but I have to give credit to Chad and Dean solely for the water management tech wizardry. That was not my doing. So just to clarify that.
Well, I'll go ahead and make the motion then to approve the site plan for SP 20-00177 for construction of a 35,000 square foot agricultural shop and office structure for sod shop located at the southeast corner of North 1900 Road and East 1450 Road, based on the findings listed in the staff report. But I do want to add an addition to that motion and make sure we strike those notes that Commissioner Thelman identified. The one about the access to 59 Highway. And then Nancy, can you remind me of the other one? The other one was
the one that talked, number 9, that talked about a building remodel.
Right. So that's my motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Passes 2-1. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item would be the, thank you all for coming. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work. Next one is the discussion of umbrella organizations' distribution of CARES Act funding. And I believe this is Sarah and maybe Brooke.
Thanks, commissioners. The umbrella organization outlines were presented to the commissioners last week as a part of our my weekly memo, and the commission asked for additional time to review them. We were able to add a few more to the packet, so they're included in the packet as well. I do want to take this opportunity to go ahead and announce that earlier today, Douglas County was notified that our direct aid plan for the CARES Act was accepted by the state of Kansas and approved. So that is tremendous good news for our community and our ability to move forward. I would say that they specifically talked about these programs as encouraging the county and actually sort of requiring that the county get detailed plans as to how the grant funds would be allocated and administered, and that we're responsible for maintaining that information as a part of our documentation for this. So we will be obviously we would be retaining this information in here as a part of that. I just want to take a quick minute to stop and talk about this acknowledgement. The state made when the state gave us our approval, they made specific note to note in multiple places how extremely extensive our process was, and how incredibly complex it was, and said several times that they want to make sure that the county has the adequate administrative capacity to administer a program of this size and magnitude. We have over 95 programs that the county will be administering here for the rest of the year. Anybody receiving over $750,000 as a part of this program will have to complete a single audit, a federal grant audit. We don't believe, we've been very upfront with people about that. We believe, they know those expectations, but this is no small endeavor to put this kind of federal funds into our community. And while they said multiple times that they want to make sure that we have the administrative capacity, I had to almost grin and say they've never met Brooke Sauer. And I do believe that we have the administrative capacity internally to manage this process and to do so effectively and efficiently. But I do think it's important to note that they are going to be watching every penny, and that they're going to be making sure that we follow the letter of the law in terms of how these funds are spent. So some due diligence at this point to make sure that the program is outlined in a way that the commissioners are comfortable with and is transparent and documented is important. So with that, I just stand for any questions that the commission might have on these particular outlines and programs.
Sarah, this Commissioner Kelly, and we talked a little bit earlier this week. One of the questions I had was some of the representation on these umbrella organizations. I see some of the representatives are here tonight, and so I don't know if you've had a chance to visit with them, or I should just address them directly about some of that.
We can certainly move some folks over to talk if you want to. Let's see here, I can promote them to panelists. I do think if we did not specifically ask for every umbrella organization to be present tonight, so I do believe that if the commissioners want to make modifications to the programs, we can certainly get with those folks tomorrow. And I doubt we would have any massive concerns with any sort of changes the commission might make. So if I don't want us to feel hamstrung by not having everyone here tonight.
Sure. One of the, just to share with the other commissioners, one of the concerns I had was that the DLI one, we said that we wanted that business support to be countywide and not just downtown Lawrence. And when I looked at who was on the team deciding on that, it was all DLI board members and DLI staff. And so one of my requests was, could we have a county-based business that's on, a county representative from outside the city of Lawrence, maybe even a Baldwin or Eudora person on that as well. Just wanted, and since Sally's here, I don't want to put you on the spot, Sally, so if maybe we need to visit later about that, but that was just a concern I had, to make sure that we had appropriate representation from the entire city of Lawrence, the county, and those other municipalities. And maybe we need to add some people to I know you're trying to keep them small, that would be my guess, but that was just a thought I had.
I had the same thought, so thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Kelly.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate it. I do think we've got to be sensitive to the folks that be included. I had one question, or I guess should I go ahead and ask a question while we're waiting for?
Yeah, go ahead if you want.
Okay. I was surprised, when I thought of this program as we were talking about it, thinking strictly retail, and I'm not very well versed in that, but I was a little surprised to see banks and financial institutions included in this, and wondering if that's if anyone else is a little queasy with that, given how, I don't know, I guess I'm a little concerned about our mom and pop shops and, storefronts that are really truly struggling, versus when I think of banks and financial institutions, as much as we need and love them, I don't necessarily think of them as being in quite the financial dire straits that some of our other retail shops are in.
I think
is that unfair?
No, that was also on my list of questions. I was surprised to see that too.
At first, I was surprised, and I thought some more about it. I use a locally owned bank myself, and use the retail aspect of it quite a bit, where I go in and I talk. And so having those partitions up, some of those things that are in there, thinking of the retail side of a bank, we think about the loans and things like that, but really that walk-up customer. And I know that's changing a lot because of the way banks work, but But to me, at first I was like, wait a minute, banks. And then I thought, well, quite honestly, there is quite a bit of retail traffic that comes in. I was really looking for businesses that have that walk-up traffic. That was what I was looking at. And so that's where I sort of went, oh, I guess banks would sort of work, but, you know, certainly up for discussion on that.
I think it would be clear that, you know, we're talking about use of PPE and sanitation in those places. So it's keeping the public safe that's entering them. You know, I think that would be the intent. It wouldn't be business interruption costs in that situation. But certainly,
Sally, I see you're on now, Sally, and again, don't feel compelled. You weren't ready to take questions tonight, so you know, don't feel like you have to. But I'm interested in those two questions. One about some larger representation amongst the group that looks at them, and then second, your thoughts on the bank issue.
Yeah, I'm always happy to chat, and thank you so much for having us tonight and asking the questions. And it's so exciting that the state has approved the program. So that just shows that Sarah and Brooke and team have given excellent instructions and education, and hopefully we've all followed instructions. So we have amended. We had our DLI board meeting last Thursday, the 3rd, and we actually did amend the program. So, and I sent an updated copy to Sarah on Friday afternoon. So we are including, I am reaching out to both Eudora and Baldwin. So our goal is to have like 3 DLI board member reps, myself, and then if I get a response from both Eudora and Baldwin that they want to send somebody, great. Let's, as far as I'm concerned, you know, 6 is as good as 5 or better. And if not, whichever community reaches out. I do also, I had reached out to Lindsay Slater at the Chamber about Lecompton. So I'm still waiting because I feel like maybe we could get, you know, somebody from Lecompton in on the group, but we do want to be inclusive. So I really appreciate the question, and that is our goal, and I am reaching out to those communities. When we talk about, so does that satisfy everyone's questions on a countywide representation on the committee?
Sally, I'm also interested in having a representative that is not that is in Lawrence, but is not a member of DLI.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want, okay. So let me then reach out.
Maybe the chamber can help find some.
Yeah, I'll reach out. Non-DLI. Okay. So we just may need to expand it. And then we wanted to have a couple of retail representatives and then a service representative. Sorry, I'm just taking notes. Okay. Does that sound good to Nancy and Michelle as well? Okay. So in terms of the services, the reason we wanted to include services, and this is interesting because when Sarah first approached me about this program, and I want to reiterate, we are very honored to have been asked to administer this countywide program because we are a small organization, and but we work with small, you know, pretty much exclusively with locally owned independent businesses, and we have that kind of feel. We want to include the services because, as Patrick said, yes, there is a retail aspect of something like a bank or an attorney's office or an architecture firm, but I think what also gets left out are like the salons and the massage therapy or the holistic health type businesses, and those are our personal services, and they don't quite, you know, they don't quite fit retail, although a lot of them, I think of like Amy's Barbershop, Downtown Barber, Salon DeMarco, they actually, they sell quite a bit of product, right? So they sell their like shampoo and hair care and skincare lines. And so we do want to make sure that we're not leaving them out. And when Sarah and I first talked about this, you know, I just don't have really a great sense of how many people are going to apply. I mean, I know that, you know, the traditional retailers, whether it's, you know, clothing, shoes, home furnishings, the niche markets like Yarn Barn and Stitch On and Waxman will, they will apply. But I just we wanted to make sure that we're including a broader business sector, if that makes sense.
I guess if I can make a comment on that, I agree. I think the salons and the kind of the personal care folks are, you know, lots of times they're really small businesses, and that probably are some of the ones that are struggling the most, and certainly have had to shut down. I guess you know, the $450,000 sounds like a lot, but it's not. And my fear is that if we make these categories so broad, you know, and so inclusive of every possible kind of, you know, retail, you know, that we might not do people much good, because we'll have spread the money so thin that it's that it really can't begin to fill you know, the PPE is one thing, but the business interruption and all of that is a whole other ballgame. So I guess that's my concern, of going kind of outside of what I guess what I would think of as regular retail and kind of small personal services. And I guess that's where I have a little bit of heartburn over banks and financial institutions, where there's maybe a little more ability to absorb this difficult season than the regular kind of retail operation, especially the small ones. So I know my bank hasn't been having indoor services. It's all been drive up. So the PPE's been very limited for them. But anyway, that's just my thoughts. I think overall, I think it looks like a great program.
And we can certainly amend and adjust. I haven't given very much detail to, you know, in terms of our communication to anyone other than our board. We've worked on this draft together. Those are the categories within our bylaws. And so that's where I took those from. But I think that, yes, when you talk about US Bank or Intrust or Central Bank of the Midwest, that's one story. But then if you talk about, like, say, First State Bank and Trust, that's got, like, you know, based in Tonganoxie or something like that. And here's the thing. We don't know if they would even apply, because with our, so again, when we amended the draft program outline of distribution, what we included in there is, in the pre-application, is really asking, like, have you gotten any PPP or any type of federal funding? Because obviously anybody who hasn't received any of that or applied for that is going to be prioritized. And several other more specific questions that will kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will. And then when we see how many people are applying, then we want to make it meaningful. I mean, to give like $500 or $1,000 to, you know, a big group of people obviously isn't as meaningful as giving a larger number. And originally we had that, and maybe that's the draft that you have, is like the $1,000 to $10,000 funding range. But when we actually talked it through at our board meeting, we decided that it would be better if we had a more detailed pre-application or part 1 of the application, and that would give us or inform us better to make the decisions in round 2. Because some of the biggest costs, and I'm well aware of this, are, you know, website. Do you have to have a website? Because our businesses, and of course my experiences with our downtown businesses, which are some of our smallest businesses, but you know, we have businesses that don't even have a POS system. They don't even have a cash register. They don't have a computer in their, literally they do not have a computer on site. They answer emails after 8 o'clock at night when they're home, and that's when I interact with them. And so folks have had to really bump up their online presence. They may have had to get a website. They have to have e-commerce. They're doing delivery, so they have mileage. Those are those business interruption costs that I'm really concerned about. Yes, PPE can get expensive, but if it's a really small business, it's not as burdensome, obviously, for the wipes and the sanitizer and the masks, etc., as when you have these major costs to finally have an online presence, to sell your product and to market your product, and you have to have some sort of a delivery vehicle. So I'm feeling like, I mean, or we kind of as a group are feeling like, you know, we do want to be able to address those types of costs. And so I don't know, it's kind of funny how, like, for me, I see Michael, my good friend, is on the call, and the chamber, hi, we're 501c6s, and so we qualify for almost nothing, right? I've had no help. I've considered shutting my office down myself. I just brought Rochelle back, thank God, from furlough from 5 months. And so we've had a lot of conversations, because I'm not going to take on debt as an organization and apply for an EIDL loan, and that's the only thing that DLI qualifies for. So there are actually quite a few businesses who haven't really applied for much, because that's a lot of weight to put on your small business. So I feel kind of like, you know, there are people who can handle the PPE costs, but it's that $5,000 of hiring a web developer and getting those subscriptions to, you know, the email marketing and the e-commerce, that's what we're hoping to get at. And so we have a more detailed, if you look at the amended or the revised draft that I sent to Sarah, and thank you, Sarah, for allowing me to send that to you. It kind of, I think hello, kitty, it'll help us in, that's okay. I have 2 of them myself. I gave it catnip out on the porch so they would leave me alone, so that we can, you know, really get to the heart of the matter.
Thanks, Sally.
Sorry.
Any other questions, concerns about the umbrella organizations, commissioners?
I guess I want to make clear that I will also, because the 2 Child Care Aware applications did not list how their decision-making process would go. So Brooke and I will follow up with them to make sure that we get, like, how they did very detailed processes as to how the money would be allocated, but if there was simply not enough funds to go around, how that process will be used. We will follow up with them and get that information as well. And I did have a couple of different conversations with Michael Davidson about the hotels program, and specifically clarifying that, just clarifying that the way it was worded there includes that the items that they will be eligible for reimbursement for are the items listed below. It's not, that is to be included in the 21,000 that a group would be eligible for, not on top of, in addition to the 21,000. And then Michael and I talked about the list of businesses, and so he has also updated his project outline, and I just received that late today, so I was not able to update the packet for the commission, but we do have an updated, more detailed outline of the eligible hotels for that as well.
Does that new list make some differentiation between locally owned and national chains, or that, or is it all just all hotels are eligible?
It does, as it currently stands, it does not. I think that's an item the commission can discuss.
Yeah,
Do you all have?
that was drawn to my attention in the, I believe it's the LRA one, was included national, and just I would like to keep it to regional and take national.
Okay.
You know, the idea of, not that those businesses aren't hurt, but it's going to be a little hard for us to sort of monitor if they're getting funds from lots of different places, and so I'd like to keep it at least regional, you know, and really impress upon Michael and Sally and Sarah in talking to LRA, because I don't think they have representation here, to keep that money local. That's really what we want to do.
Yeah, I agree with. Oh, I agree with that. That was a concern of mine as well. And then also on the LRA proposal, I noticed that they have included hotels with full service restaurants, and I don't know that we need to include hotels in two of these categories. I guess, again, because, you know, the money there'll be so many different organizations that need this. Do either of you feel strongly that hotels should be included in LRAs?
No, I think they need to be in one category, and I think we need to stick as much as we can to this locally owned. And then on the LRA, their members on their committee, I'm not familiar with all those people. Are any of them from outside of the city of Lawrence as far as business or restaurant ownership? Anybody?
I could look into that for you, but I believe they are all, you know, Lawrence-based businesses in terms of the membership of the Restaurant Association. The group that's going to do the original screening consists of myself, Kim from my staff, and then 3 representatives of the Restaurant Association. But I think all of them are basically, you know, all Lawrence-based. I don't think anybody is outside of Lawrence currently with that group. I know we're planning to reach out to restaurants throughout the county, and we've developed that mailing list and an email list. And as soon as, you know, now that the grant has been approved by the state, we're ready to move ahead for the outreach. But we'll be reaching out to restaurants throughout the county.
Okay, well, just like the others, I'd like to make sure that we have representation on that committee from outside of the city of Lawrence, please, and outside of the LRA.
I will bring that to the attention of the board. We're meeting on Friday, and I will bring that to them. I'm sure they will just do like Sally. They'll expand that group a little bit.
Great, if you could pass it along. Thank you, Michael.
Be my pleasure.
And we'll be sure to communicate that as well to the group too, but so we'll get them both ways, Michael.
Yep.
And also to strike the hotel, the inclusion of hotels in LRA's list.
Would you allow the hotel to make a choice? They might decide it might be better for them to apply under the Restaurant Association as opposed to the hotel grant. Would you allow them to make that decision? They could apply for one of the two, but they can't apply for both?
Well, and if I'm correct here, Michael, I think we struck all food from the hotel plan because food, any sort, so PPE is covered for hotels, but no food is, because the only food that's allowed under the CARES Act is for community distribution of food. So I would think that would be hard for business interruption. So, and if we're talking about PPE, I just want to be clear here. It would depend on which piece that they're looking to apply for.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
I don't know. Well, I don't know if that's what Commissioner Thellman is.
Hmm.
Would rather have them. I don't know how many hotels have full service restaurants. I think there are a few.
3.
Yeah.
The Eldridge, the Oriad, and the Doubletree.
Well, I don't mean to be complicating things. I just think it's important not to double dip, and it's important to make sure that, I guess I worry about the larger chains, really focusing on local is what we need to do. So that's just my 2 cents. So I'll let you guys.
Okay, we will in the application procedure, we will, indicate, if it's locally owned or it's regionally owned. I mean, there's a few that are locally owned, but most of them are more regional in nature, hotel owners who have multiple hotels within the state or multiple states, but we will provide that information for you.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing about when you talk about chains, and this is really more for some of our local restaurants, or our restaurants that are located within the county, is just to be aware and that some of them are franchises that are locally owned. So for instance, Pickleman's Deli or Pita Pit or Texas Roadhouse, I believe, even though they are wider spread chains, I don't know. I'll be honest. I do try to walk. I try to walk the walk. I don't eat at a lot of chains. I do love Pickleman's though, because it's right across. And Keith and Janelle are awesome, but there are certainly local owners, and even Fuzzy's Tacos, that they are local as well. They're Lawrence based, so they have Lawrence and Topeka. So perhaps there's a way, Michael, just that we can. I know that the way the application is set up, because I'm a member of LRA and I'm a little bit involved in that, but it talks about the different kind of locally owned independent, and then like a local chain and a regional chain and a national chain. And I totally agree with, if we still had the Gap, or we have Urban Outfitters, right? Talking about them versus talking about Weavers or Eccentricity is very different, and what the capabilities are, and what's at the kind of the support systems. But I think that's why it just in case you didn't know, I was kind of surprised about this myself years ago when I started in this job, is that there are some very, very local owners of these franchises, and the support they get is really not what you might expect.
So is the commission comfortable with local ownership of a franchise?
I think our focus was locally owned. I don't think we were getting down into what type of, whether it's McDonald's or Pickleman's, is it locally owned? And
okay.
I think more, at least what I was bringing up with was more with the hotels and the banks. It's, US Bank and Doubletree and Marriott, and that's where I was getting a little more concerned about not being locally owned. So
the hotels in general are franchisees. So whether under the Doubletree or the Marriott umbrella, the amount of support they get from them is not great. It's really it's a fairly a one-way street in terms of it. But again, they are locally owned and operated. And again, we will provide the information on who owns and operates the hotels, so you guys can judge that. Because again, we have, just like the Best Western, he owns multiple hotels. He's based out of Wichita, but he's in our state. And I think that would qualify as a hotel. for this program. If you disagree, please let me know and we'll work on that. But again, hotels are a little bit different. You know,
Yeah.
hotels are built basically by developers.
No, I
But they
agree,
are,
hotels
you
are
know, they employ
different.
local,
And
yeah.
I agree that
obviously,
hotels are different and that you guys will probably make the best decision. I'm just saying that I think those big corporations where there's not an owner, you know, Tom Dobsky from McDonald's or Ken Creasy from Taco John's that lives in the community, it gets a little fuzzier, but I am sure that you guys will handle it well because situations like the hotels are different, but we still need to support them.
absolutely, thank you. Yeah.
I'm going to use a little bit of chair authority here and sort of rein us into our meeting. Commissioners, do you have any other feedback for Sarah and Sally? And Michael will let you know if we have questions here. I'm enjoying the conversation, but we're getting sort of outside of how we usually run our meetings a little bit. Commissioner Thelman, Commissioner Drew, so I think I've hit on my major concerns or just things that cause me pause more than concern.
No, I think all of mine have been voiced, and it sounds like everybody's on the same page. I just want to say how much I appreciate Michael and Sally and all the others who aren't here on the Zoom meeting, but I know that they are getting ready to do an awful lot of work to make this program successful. So super, super appreciative of all your hard work.
Thank you. But before you rein me in, Pat, let me just say something that Sarah and I were competing for who was the most frustrated during this process. I'm sure Sally and Brooke are the most satisfied. So thank you so much for everything you guys have done for this process.
Just as a bit of follow-up, commissioners, what we will do after, if the commissioners are satisfied with the modifications made today, what we will do is we will communicate to all the umbrella organizations and include not only the comments from tonight, but also some additional information that the state of Kansas has said to us in terms of how these programs are run and administered. So they will get another communication back to us after tonight's meeting with this information, as well as some of the details. The state has made it very clear that we need to be sure that we're getting from organizations that are dispersing funds.
Okay, commissioners, anything else? We do need to take public comment on this item since it's a regular agenda item.
I'll just say thank you for your help.
Yeah, big thank you for all your work on this. We know the timeline was super short and it's a huge job. So we really appreciate you stepping up and listening to us as we come up with new ways, new hoops to jump through, as does the state. Sarah, is there anybody at the courthouse who would like to provide public comment on this item?
No, we don't have anyone for comment.
Anybody online who'd like to provide public comment on this item?
Michael Davidson, Explore Lawrence, less of a comment as a question. Sarah, because the Restaurant Association grant is so large, you talked about a different kind of auditing process that needs to go on. Is there a chance that you might be able to hop on to a meeting with the Restaurant Association, you or Brooke, on Friday to explain that to them? Because obviously there's going to be a cost associated with an enhanced audit, I would assume, and seeing that they're at 1.6 million, they guarantee that we're going to have to do an audit for them.
So usually, Michael, we don't answer questions like that directly. We can direct Sarah. Sarah, if you could touch base with Michael, that would be awesome. Thank you. All right. If there's no other public comment. Okay, this was not an item we were voting on. It was clearly for discussion only. So let's move on to general public comment. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sally, for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. General public comment. Oh, well, first we have appointments. Commissioners, do we have? Nope, not at this.
I don't believe we do today.
We sort of outdid, Michelle sort of outdid ourselves last week on so many. So let's take a little break this week. General public comment. So general public comment will be at the end of each meeting with a limit of, one comment per person. The commission reserves the right to place a time limit of 3 minutes per speaker if desired. Individuals may not give unused time to other speakers. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss, debate, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer to the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. All comments should be directed to the county commission. Sarah, is there anyone there who would like to provide public comment?
We don't have anyone. Thank you.
Anybody online like to provide public comment? Just please raise your hand.
Not seeing anybody.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, we'll close public comment and turn it over to Commissioner and Administrator Miscellaneous, and we'll start with Sarah.
Thank you, commissioners. Just real briefly, I do want to share, the good news just doesn't stop tonight, which is really great for us. And I would actually turn some of this over to Jill Joliker. Included in the weekly memo is a paragraph related to the state CDBG for home mitigation funds. The city of Lawrence was notified this week that the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation that a request for $718,112 in emergency solutions grants for COVID-19 was submitted in July and was approved. This request was submitted in order to prevent and prepare for and respond to the coronavirus amongst individuals and families who are homeless or are receiving homelessness assistance or homelessness prevention activities to mitigate the impacts of the coronavirus. A number of organizations, including Bert Nash for Rapid Rehousing Funds, Catholic Charities for Homeless Prevention, the Lawrence Community Shelter, the Willow Domestic Violence Center, and the Homeless Management Information HMIS data entry system that we've all heard so much about in some of our different programs was included for funding. This is a huge deal. This partnered with what we're able, I know I just keep saying things are a huge deal. I got to come up with some better adjectives. But in combination with the CARES Act funding, I really feel like we're very well positioned to be able to continue to meet the needs of our most vulnerable citizens as we continue to deal with the unanticipated impacts of this global pandemic. And I want to thank Jill for her continued constant work in this area and with this team, and we have it is very exciting, and it's very reassuring that we've got some funds here to be able to meet the needs that we're going to have. Jill, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say real quick, or I kind of covered the highlights. No. But
yeah, it's not CDBG money. It's ESG money. The CDBG money. We are looking for some additional, the city's waiting for some additional approval on the CDBG funds, finalizing everything we need for the funds that have already been approved for these shelter improvements. But I think a lot of credit needs to go to also Danny Walters with the City of Lawrence's CDBG office. She put a lot of time and energy into creating this plan and working with folks like Matthew Falk and David Tucker at Bert Nash Community Mental Health Center on really trying to demonstrate to the state that the community is working hard to have a coordinated housing focused approach to serving the homeless population and those that are at risk of homelessness. And I think that the state is noting the efforts to coalesce and coordinate, and in a way, they're giving us a chance to really have some big impacts with these projects. But we're going to be working hard to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts with some of the work that will be funded through the CARES Act money that the county's awarding. It's going to be a lot of keeping track of things, but nothing that I think our team can't do. But it really puts us in a really great position to be successful with a lot of the projects that we are pursuing right now.
Sarah, that was a question I had as you were sharing that, is we're putting a lot of dollars out there. And I remember at one point there was a question of whether they will let us reframe some of the in the CARES Act, did you get, when you got the letter, was there any communication about whether we can move stuff around because we didn't think we were going to get this money, or we didn't think we were going to get this money? Any discussion of that at all? And we've never really done our runners up, but I guess we didn't need to, so.
You know, they approved our program in total. You know, I think if there are modifications as we go in this process, Douglas County, like the other 104 counties in Kansas, will be working with the State Recovery Office to sort of meet those challenges. So at this point in time, I think we have what we have. And if we needed to submit some sort of plan modification, we would work with the state at that time to figure out what how we could do that and if we could do that. But I believe we've done a pretty good job here of making sure that we don't have duplication of effort in terms of what we're trying to achieve.
Great, thanks.
That's all I have, commissioners.
Any items from commissioners?
Just a quick question, kind of along the same vein. Sarah, have you heard any progress reports on when the Sparks notifications are going to go out?
Go for round 2?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And Brooks on the line, I think folks are being told, I thought those were kind of rolling applications for some of the categories. We could prepare another update for you at a future meeting, commissioners, just to kind of see where we're at on that process. I know Brooks kind of watching that whole thing pretty closely, if that's something you'd be interested in.
Folks are starting to ask if we know when they're going to be notified, and so I'm asking you if you know.
No.
Sounds like you don't know either.
No.
So okay.
I don't know that they
Well, if you-
necessarily talk to us first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else, commissioners? Okay. Well, this was our third long meeting in a row. We're starting to make a habit of these. So thank you for sticking in there. We never took a break. Great job. We will see everybody next week. We are adjourned.